We will call this meeting to order. And if we could have our public comment cards up here. The first item of business will be there are no multiple item card requests today, so we will move straight to the agenda. On item number 2, we just have, on item 2, there are public comment cards. First, we will hold that. That was going to be consent, but we'll hold item 2. Item 5, that was going to be consent. We have a number of cards here. Item number 4. We could, item 4, we will continue to the 31st, October 31st. At the request of Council District 13, item 4 continued to October 31st. So, and there is no item 1 on my agenda, but item 1, Mr. Bertoni.
No report today, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we will note and file item number 1. Item number 2, we will move to item number 2. If that could be read into the record, please.
Sure. Item 2, Councilman, this is a city attorney prepare ordinance relative to a mixed-use project, the Reef, in CD9.
Okay, so Wayne from Encino.
He had multiple cards, I guess. He had cards on every item. Wayne had multiple cards. He had cards on every item, so he gets his 2 minutes.
1 second. Mr. Encino, did you sign up for a number of cards? Or just this one?
On each one?
Mr. Encino, did you sign up for various items on the agenda today, or just this one?
Let's see, we signed up on 1 through 7.
Okay, why don't we do this then? As I go through the items, I'm going to pull out your card, but for right now, you have 2 minutes to speak on multiple agenda item. So go ahead.
Okay, so you're not going to call them in separate, okay. All right, item number 1, work programs. Planning, fuck the plan. We don't have a plan. So, item number 2, signage supplement. Oh, that's in current prices district. Let's go ahead and defer to the real power in CD9.
Dale Richardson and Associates. Dale Richardson and Associates supports this project because they're really getting money from the city. And Mr. Current Price is voting on contracts that belong to his wife.
Who's not really his wife? Yes, the drama continues.
If I could ask you to please stick your comments to anything on the agenda and on the item before us. Thank you.
Then, number 3, CD12, the 5th place finisher Dibble Dwarf project in Porter Ranch Development. Why are we still here on those projects? You got to pay off Mitchell Englander's campaign debt. This is the way to do it.
Sir, that is your second warning. If you,
the way to do it.
Mr. Encino, you come to this meeting every single time.
My time.
Can you listen, please?
But you're taking my time.
You do. The clock has been stopped.
Okay.
You are here at every meeting. You know the rules. You have been warned twice. Please stick to the items on the agenda. If you do it again, we're going to ask you to leave this meeting. Thank you.
All right. So now we got 13. Actually, I support that. It's amazing. Actually, they're doing something right on number 4. See, I'm not like these people that come here, all of you are crooks, you should be in jail. That's not me. Nope, not this person. Item number 5, fuck item 5. No on item 5. 6, fuck number 6. It's been continued too long. Deny it. And finally, and the most important thing, number 7, we do not want linkage fees. Spend the $138 million of those HHH funds first, then charge a linkage fee. And finally, and the most important thing, fuck Mitchell Englander.
Mr. Encino, we're going to ask you to leave this meeting. We were warned about sticking to items on the agenda, and at the end of your comments, you put a superfluous comment that had nothing to do with this meeting. So thank you. Please, you are disrupting the meeting. You're being asked to leave this meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you, sergeants. Okay, item number 2, we have the applicant has submitted a card, Tom Stemock. If you want to waive your card, I think we're inclined to move forward with this today, unless you have something to say. You okay? Okay, he's waiving for the record that he will waive his time to speak. We've heard this item previously in committee, so item number 2, we will move. Mr. Price, unless you have anything, this is in your district, anything on this? Okay, so we'll move item number 2 without objection. So ordered. Thank you. Item number 5, if we could call that to order, please.
Sure. Item 5, Councilman, this is a report from the Planning Commission. It's a vesting zone change ordinance for a mixed-use project with 5 land use entitlements for a 133-room hotel. My understanding is that the appeal has been withdrawn, Councilman.
The appeal has been withdrawn. Okay, so let me ask Craig Bullock from Council District 13. Are you here? Do you wish to speak on this item? I think we will move to approve the item since the appeal has been withdrawn.
Thank you.
Okay.
So the council office does support this item. We would like to have the queue conditions modified to reflect what is in your packet. I believe
I'm
you-
sorry, we cannot hear you. Can you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Yes, the council office supports the project and wishes to have the queue conditions modified as they appear in your packet, which had to do with the vertical clearances from 40 feet to 17 feet.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll take that
Thank you.
into consideration. Okay, Susan Hunter, aren't any of these people the applicant? It's not listed on my card. Susan Hunter, Nicole Shahinian, and Guzel George Abrams. Any of these the applicants? No? Okay. Every speaker has 1 minute to speak. Welcome. You have 3? So what we can do is after this item, take you up on the multiple agenda item. You want to speak under the multiple agenda item, you have 2 minutes to speak on everything, or you can speak now for 1 minute on this item. Which?
I'll take the one for now and then the 2 for the multiple.
You can't do that. You can't take this and take the other for 2 minutes. You can either speak now for 1 minute on this item, or speak later for 2 minutes on all the cards you submitted.
But it's 3 items. Wouldn't that be a minute each?
Nope. Multiple items, you only get 2 minutes, no matter how many you submit. Not my rules. I just execute them.
Okay, so you're saying I can do 1 minute now and then 2 minutes?
No,
Or no?
I'm saying it's a choice. You could either do 1 now or do 2 after this item.
Then I'm going to do the 2 after this item. That's
It's your choice. Okay, we'll do that. Nicole Shahinian? Not here. George Abrams? Are they coming from the overflow room? Okay. Sergeants, is somebody getting Nicole and George Abrams? Yes. Yep. And can I ask the city clerk while we wait, if we could go over our comment cards and look it over one more time to make sure that anybody who submitted more than one card is under the multiple agenda item? Thank you.
For some strange reason, the clerk wants to do the people in the other room first. I don't know why. That's what they stated so long ago.
Okay. Mr. Abrams, you're up to speak, as is Nicole Shahinian
Oh, because we're on another.
on item number 5.
We're on 5. Okay, that's the flag, huh? No. Right.
Welcome.
Hi. I'm speaking on item 1 first. Here to
This item number 5.
Well, I spoke on, I filled a card for 1 and 5, and I was denied entry for 10 minutes. I had to argue with the cop.
Okay. Clerk, this hasn't happened before in this committee, but we need to make sure that if people submit more than one card, we need to separate those so that they're under the multiple agenda item section. Mr. Abrams, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, well,
Your 1
you
minute
wanna
here?
Just give me 5, right? I'll do 5 now, and you call me back for 1?
No, because that would be multiple agenda item. You could have 2 minutes right after this
Okay.
item.
Well, I'll start out on item 1 then. Okay.
Okay, let me do this. I'm trying to finish this item. This is the item that's up. If you could just step
Okay,
aside right
okay,
after
I'll
this
start
item,
on
I have you
5.
and somebody else I'm going to call on.
Okay, I'll start on 5 then.
No, Mr. Abrams, I just hold on. We'll give you 2 full minutes right after this item. We need to move this item and act on this item before we take the multiple agenda item. That's
Yeah,
not
but I'm
up on the
speaking
agenda.
on 5.
So you want 1 minute on 5? No, you either have 1 minute now on this item or 2 minutes later for the other multiple agenda item. That gives you 2 minutes
How
to
do I speak on 5 after it's finished?
Pardon me?
How do I speak on item 5 after it's finished?
That's a
You're
very
on
good
item
point.
5. I want to speak on item 5.
That's a very
before
good
you
point.
vote on it.
Let me do this. We're going to table item 5, and I'm going to call the multiple agenda item cards again. We will call that to order, and you have your 2 minutes now, and then we will go to Susan Hunter right after this. Go ahead.
Okay, on item 1, I want to speak the gross inadequacy of Vince Bertoni's management of the department. We have incomplete files, but staff say they never have hearings when files are incomplete. There's no integrity of files. There's no index of the records and files, and staff allows applicants to remove records. There's no scanning of files to be put online when the cases are pending or active. It's useless after the case is closed. CDP hearings are not held before bodies as required by the code. They're heard by individuals. That's illegal. We need hearing rules for land use hearings as required by state statute, and that's never been done, and I've sued on that. And it's right currently in the Court of Appeal. And speaking times are insufficient to make meaningful comments. So you can't make a meaningful point on a land use hearing in just 1 minute. It's completely absurd. So you need to get rid of Vince Bertoni. You need to have speaking rules. You need to have integrity in your files, and you have to stop allowing applicants to remove records. It's illegal.
Thank you.
Okay, item 5.
Was that 2 minutes or 1 minute?
Well, that was 1 minute.
Okay, go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm item 5. Okay, Hollywood is overdense, and we don't have sufficient infrastructure to increase housing capacity. And yet the planning department, the city council routinely allows more and more development in the Hollywood area, and we're suffering from terrible traffic congestion. Also, when you get rid of affordable housing, you have a cumulative impact. Luxury housing is not a proper replacement for affordable housing. CEQA allows for cumulative impacts to be studied, but you never have EIRs when these kinds of conversions, hotel conversions or condo conversions take place. And it's a death by 1,000 cuts.
Thank you. Susan Hunter, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Susan Spencer, Los Angeles Tenants Union. I'm caseworker with the Hollywood Local. And I want to say first off on item number 5, there is no side setback above the first floor, which means that there's no room for emergency services to get ladders and equipment through if there's a fire on the north side. Which brings me back to my main point. We can no longer continue to operate in a short-sighted fashion. The city has no problem with getting money now, but you want to worry about the repercussions later. This is not planning. However, the city is already creating a workaround for the home sharing ordinance to displace tenants who are home sharing, so companies and landlords can use those units for hotel purposes. So when it comes to displacing people or creating dangerous situation, there's no shortage of city involvement then. For example, the linkage fee, which will cause mass displacements in low-income areas. I can only guess that this is being done intentionally. Airbnb might be a large lobbyist, but it is the taxpayers who pay the city staff's salaries. We also pay for thoughtful long-term planning, and we'd like to see that be brought back into our city again. Unfortunately, the city has seemed to declare war on low-income and people of color. We are apparently the undesirables that you will do everything you can to push this out and use any means in planning to do so. Unfortunately, it's sad that you seem to have forgotten that it's the people that put you in those seats and not Airbnb.
Leah Renee. Leah Renee. Hello.
Hi. Item 1, Leah.
This is the multiple agenda item, so you have 2 minutes to speak on whatever cards you submitted to speak on.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to talk to you about the Director of City Planning, Vince Bertoni. He's taking bribes as Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we could hear you.
They said they couldn't hear me. Okay, so the Director of City Planning is taking bribes as defined in the California Penal Code 7, and it says that anything of value, and what you're doing is you're exchanging legal fees of $50,000 and $100,000 as a quid pro quo exchange. And California Penal Code 92 says every person who gives or offers anything of value to make a decision or to influence their vote or opinion. And why that's so big is in the coastal zone, it actually says you cannot do it. California Code of Regulations number 13055G says no matter what, you cannot require an applicant for a permit for single-family dwellings to reimburse the city for litigation costs or fees in defending the challenge. You've got billions of dollars of legal fees that you're violating the people's rights. And you're not only that, but he's also stealing documents. They have incomplete applications. Nearly every single application I look at is omitted the signature, or it's omitted the project description, or it's inconsistent with the law. Nearly every one of them. You just approved something on Earlham. It's 4 projects, and it says $50,000. I'll give you $50,000 if you give me the approval. Totally illegal, over and over again. It's just not one question. It's just correct, specific language. It says no fees, and then you take fees. If you don't stop this, you're going to bankrupt the city, and you're going to put that debt on all of us property taxpayers, and that's really unfair and really illegal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that concludes our multiple agenda item for today. We will go back to item number 5 and reopen up item number 5. There are no more public comment cards. Any questions or comments on item number 5? Seeing none. So we will move to deny the appeal insofar as the appeal has been withdrawn. We will incorporate the amendments that were made by the Council's District 13 representative and public comment today. Any objections to that? Seeing no objections, so ordered. And for the record, we've been joined by Councilmember Blumenfield prior to that vote. Thank you. Item number 3, if we could call that item to order, please.
Yes, Councilman. Item 3 is a City Planning Commission proposed ordinance to amend the development agreement between the city and Porter Ranch Development Company.
Okay, Mr. Englander.
No, thank you very much. I'd like to move to request the city attorney to prepare and present a DA amendment and the ordinance to extend the term of the DA for 4 years. But I'd also like to hold the equestrian staging area portion of the DA amendment in Plum, and planning will process a separate entitlement, which will meet and will hold the DA portion for that Plum action at a later date.
Sounds good. Okay, motion's been made. Is there any objections to that? Any questions? Seeing none, so ordered. Thank you very much. Item number 6, can you call that to order, please?
Item 6, Councilman, this is a City Planning Commission draft ordinance as it relates to the short-term rentals.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mejia. And before we begin, I want to make a few announcements about how we are going to handle public comment today. There's quite a bit of people here today on this matter. And given the extraordinary amount of people for this item, we have made some special arrangements. First, there are 2 areas to monitor today's meeting. The first is here in council chambers. The second is an overflow room in the public works room. Speakers should fill out a comment card and give it to the council sergeants. All speakers will be given 1 minute to speak. We have Spanish translators for those who need Spanish translation. Please speak to the clerk if you need assistance with that. And we are going to limit the public comment today to approximately 1 hour. If you came to speak and were not able to in the allotted time, you can speak the next time this committee considers this item. I also encourage you to write your comments down and submit them to the city clerk. All written correspondence will be posted to the public record by the city clerk. So that is in terms of procedure for today. And today we are continuing consideration of a citywide policy to regulate home sharing, also known as short-term rentals. The last time we considered this item, we heard many different perspectives which were important to hear when considering this policy of important work. And I again want to summarize what we hope to achieve through the adoption of an ordinance. First, we want to protect our housing supply so that short-term rentals do not impact availability for housing and the affordability of housing. We are in a housing crisis, and the last thing we need is in an ordinance is that it will allow for units to be kept vacant or off the rental market. We want to protect quality of life for our neighborhoods so that we enable true home sharing and prevent party houses and ghost hotels. We are hoping to have a fiscally responsive ordinance that will ensure the short-term rental industry is robust and contributes its fair share to taxes to the city. And we want to enact a policy that does not punish current hosts who are good operators, while also strengthening the city's ability to identify and enforce on those who would abuse the opportunity to participate in short-term rentals. So before we begin, would any of my colleagues want to make a statement before we begin? Do you have opening comments? I do. Okay. Mr. Englander?
Thank you very much. And I know we're going to hear a lot from the public on this, but just to start off on the gate, I think the way that you've sort of framed the process, if you will, is that we're going to hear from, and the report that came from planning, and then public comment, and then planning department will come back and analyze and come back with any questions or suggestions that we have based on all of that.
Yes, what we hope to do today is hear more input from our planning staff that had went back to analyze and research some questions we had at the last meeting. We would then hear from public comment, and we do not intend to vote on this today. We do want to have additional time for our planning staff and other city departments to review the additional questions we may have today.
Okay. If I could, I may have some suggestions that I would want to ask planning. Mm-hmm. Will we have that opportunity when planning's done before public comment?
Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Sounds good. So, with that, anybody else? Okay. With that, let's get to it and have the planning department do their presentation.
Afternoon, council members. My name is Matt Glesney. I'm with the department's citywide housing policy unit, and we're very pleased to be back here to discuss this very important policy matter that we are wrestling with here. Like most cities in the country, this is a new activity, relatively speaking, the size and the scope of it. And as you well framed, Mr. Chair, the ordinance attempts to strike the balance between recognizing the many positive and worthwhile aspects of short-term rental activity for hosts, bringing people into their homes, sharing the neighborhoods, and balancing that approach with the protection of our residential neighborhoods and our housing stock. And so that's the proposal in the draft ordinance in front of you that was approved by the City Planning Commission. We went through that ordinance in some detail when we were here in June, the various provisions of the ordinance. We were asked in June to come back and look in additional detail on some particular questions, provide some more data, some background on how we reached our conclusions, and look into a number of policy options, et cetera. So we'll be walking through the report back that we presented to the committee last week. It is online with the council file, and we'll just highlight some of the main provisions of that report. First thing we were asked to do is look at the current state of short-term rentals in the city of Los Angeles, with particular emphasis on the impacts on housing stock. To do that, we needed to get new numbers, and so we were able to get a new report done that basically looked at the top 20 short-term rental websites in the city of Los Angeles currently operating, and come up with a new sort of number of how much activity there is. And so we believe there's about 23,000 unique active short-term rentals in the city of Los Angeles at this moment. However, not all of those are necessarily impacting housing stock or being used regularly, so we had to dig a little deeper. About 69% of those numbers are entire home listings, but that still does not give us the full picture. What I think we wanted to look at is how often are these spaces used, because that's a real marker of, are they available for long-term rental, or are they pretty much reserved for short-term rental? So we have some numbers there. We have a number of 11,400 units being used for more than 90 days a year. That's kind of maybe a high-end estimate. And we have about 6,600 short-term rentals being used for more than 180 days. So what we did is we sort of took that as a range from about 6 to 10,000.
1 second, please.
Yeah.
We have a question.
Just a quick question, because I didn't see it in the report on this. What was the time period of that analysis?
It was
Over the
it was very recent. I think end of September, early October.
No,
of this year.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I get that.
It's a current snapshot.
It's a current snapshot, but if
That's
you
right.
registered, for example, a year ago, then you would show up on the current snapshot, right?
Yeah, I believe what they tried to do, this was a consultant, Host Compliance, that did the scan. They have a way to try to isolate active listings. So if there's been activity within the last year, they were included on this. But if they've been inactive for a year, I believe they were not included.
So if it was active within the last year,
That's correct, sir.
because that wasn't in the report. Okay.
There's a larger number of 29,000.
Well, the only reason I bring it up is because I also, I just want to see the methodology in that and how they got to the numbers. There was a major event last year that probably sort of blew up the rental and the sharing market, as you well know, probably to the proportion that is, I'm sure it's measurable, but I'm not sure if it's measured in this analysis. There was an event where Angelinos last year actually moved out of their homes and stayed here locally and rented for long periods of time, up to some for short periods of time and some for long periods of time. And there was probably close to 10,000 homes here in Los Angeles, and I just don't know if those are calculated anywhere in these figures.
I think it's a fair point.
That was in my district,
This is
the
a snapshot
the Porter Ranch gas leak,
Right.
where they actually relocated about 10,000 households, not individuals, close to 20,000, 25,000 individuals. Some for a period of a month, some for a period of 6 months, some for 9 months. And they actually, the whole relocation companies utilized all the shared platforms. They used every hotel that was available, and they used all the shared platforms. But these numbers would be dramatically different had that occurrence not happened. So I just didn't know if that was actually ever figured into any of these numbers.
Just on that point, as a clarification point, would those numbers be counted if they were over 30 days? Do they get counted or they don't get counted?
This actually excluded the 23,000 unique short-term rentals, is excluding properties that are focused on more than 30 days. So this is actually short-term rental,
Right,
less
so,
than 30
so the
days.
numbers may be skewed in multiple directions. One, because you have those folks, but also because most of those folks are probably more than 30 days. And if they're more than 30 days, they don't get counted on that list.
Except some of them were renewals and they were only good for 2 weeks at a time. So, right, that's,
It just makes it complicated.
so we just don't, right, okay. It just wasn't calculated, it wasn't figured in this equation.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we came to this number of, we think, around 6,000 or 10,000 units that are essentially being used primarily as short-term rental that are not available for long-term rental. By itself, that's not a huge number in the scheme of things in the city of Los Angeles, the number of housing units. It's less than 1% of our housing unit total. I think what concerns many folks is the growth, the very fast growth of this activity, and the fact that the amount of units it's taking off and the number of spaces it's being taken off the rental market because of that growth. So we've calculated about a 35% growth in the last year. Backing into that, that means potentially anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 spaces that may have been available for long-term use are no longer available, are now dedicated to short-term use. Just as perspective, that's more than we process in terms of demolitions and conversions and Ellis Act approvals in most years, on an average year. So these are sizable numbers when you look at the growth rate and the conversions that are taking place. I think the other point of concern is just the concentration in certain neighborhoods. This is something we see across the city now, but particularly still concentrated in high tourist destination neighborhoods. We've provided a report that breaks it down by council offices and by neighborhoods in the appendix. We were also asked to look at the percentage of this activity in RSO, or rent-stabilized units. And we've actually got two different figures there and a bit conflicting. I'll just share them both. We have our report, and our attachment says about 55% of these listings are in multifamily buildings, which are not all RSO, but the majority is RSO. Versus we also have Airbnb, who actually looked at RSO properties and did some more sophisticated analysis and came with a much lower percentage. They're estimating only 7 to 10% of their revenue comes from RSO housing stock. So slightly different numbers there. We were asked to look at the number of nuisances that our enforcement agencies are receiving around short-term rentals, and on multifamily properties, HCID LA's responsibility. HCID LA reported about 419 open cases on short-term rentals since May 2015. That's about one complaint every other day. About 133 of those have been closed and 12 referred to the city attorney. The Department of Building and Safety reported about 200 listings, but they caution that they are not tracking these consistently. It's kind of a keyword search. The third point in our report is looking at kind of the rationale between the key provisions of the ordinance. So just doubling back and saying why, and it's sort of, I think, three main points that this ordinance kind of rests upon. Number one is the primary residency requirement, the requirement that you live in the property at least 6 months of the year. This was something that was in the direction from the original motion to limit this activity to somebody's house. This is a common approach in other cities. We believe it is the most effective way to limit the negative impacts on both the housing stock and the neighborhoods. Obviously, if you live in a property, you're not losing housing stock. If you live and are available in a property, you're probably not causing as many nuisances. So we think the primary residence is really the core of this ordinance. And according to Airbnb, about 84% of their hosts are report to be primary residences. The second main ordinance provision is the cap. There is a 180-day cap that would limit the activity to 180 days a year. This cap started at 90 days, went to 120 days with the planning department. Our planning commission recommended going up to 180 days. The cap is important for a number of reasons. Number one, just to limit the overall activity. I think if you're a neighbor, you'd appreciate it just being a few days a week versus a full-time coming and going. So it's just the impact on neighbors, but also very important is the impact on housing stock. And this was very mindful coming up with a number of trying to look at what point does it make more sense to transition a property or rental from short-term to or from long-term to short-term. And there's different analyses. We presented them both from different sides of the issue, but I believe the range is probably somewhere between 90 and 180 days, depending on the neighborhood. where that break-even point occurs, where there's financial incentives to switch perhaps to a short-term rental. And so the 180-day cap is sort of at the top end of where that range is today. But the idea is really, even though we have a primary residency requirement, I believe the idea is that we don't want to have an economic inducement for folks to even consider converting to short-term, because they know it will not be profitable in the end, essentially. So that's where that cap comes from. The third point is the RSO units, the complete prohibition, maintaining the prohibition in our rent-stabilized housing stock. Again, probably out of a caution, given the critical nature of our stock, the very low vacancy rates, and really trying to create a bright line, because it is more difficult to enforce short-term rentals within buildings themselves, within multifamily buildings. There's also a number of concerns we've heard about multifamily buildings from tenants, from landlords who may not want that activity taking place in their buildings, and so the RSO ban hits on a number of those things. We'll just caution that any changes to any of those three pillars we've been advised may require additional CEQA analysis, any expansion of the scope beyond those limits, because that's what's been studied up to this point, and so additional provisions that would allow more short-term rentals would have to just be analyzed for California Environmental Quality Act purposes.
So on that point, if we add anything that would either increase the number of short-term rentals or decrease, either direction would require additional or just increase?
It's my understanding that the primary concern is any increase.
So we would have to make some huge assumptions in whatever policy change we make that it's going to increase. Sometimes we don't know if it'll increase or decrease, or can we make those forecasts?
I think that's what the analysis would have to flesh out.
Okay.
Given any changes, we'd have to look at it.
Okay, thank you.
The fourth point in our report is looking at best practices around registration and enforcement. I think what we've learned from other cities is to make this process as easy as possible for folks on the front end, for hosts to register with the city. You can have a great policy, but if nobody's coming in and registering and nobody's putting that registration number on their listing, you've got an enforcement problem, because now you're mixing up sort of the small-time casual operators with the more commercial operators. So we want everyone to come in and register, so low barriers, low fees we're recommending. In fact, no fee would be recommended to make it very easy for folks to register. We want to work with technology and get this, make it very simple where you could register from online, from your phone, if need be. Enforcement's a huge topic. I won't belabor it, except to say that the ordinance allows for multiple approaches to enforcement, including the traditional complaint-based, as well as envisioning a more proactive enforcement approach that would be able to look at listings, find out where the registration numbers, ask folks to please, hey, we noticed you don't have a registration number, please come in and register with us. The proactive, of course, would cost probably a little bit more money. So the ordinance did build in a funding mechanism for the enforcement and administration of the ordinance. The ordinance builds in a 10% of the TOT, the transient occupancy tax, to be dedicated for administration and enforcement, and we believe that to be sufficient to cover the costs involved with that. We're asked to look at alternatives to that approach. One alternative that was requested to look is to charge hosts more. We could do that. You could charge hosts, and you could raise revenue for that. Many cities do that. But again, we're concerned with the casual users. Even a low fee may discourage the more casual users from registering. You can also, we were asked to look at surcharging an extra fee or an extra surcharge on platform or on listings themselves as a way to raise revenue for this, and that is something that other cities have done, and we've discussed that in our report. Finally, we were asked to look at various policy options, in particular second homes or vacation rentals. We presented our thoughts on that. We do have concerns with building that into an ordinance like this, which is meant to be for sharing your own residence and therefore is meant to be a fairly low bar. We believe if you were talking about vacant homes, maybe a different set of policy concerns and therefore a different set of policy options, a different mechanism beyond the simple registration process. So we've outlined what that may look like, a conditional use permit, for example. I think I'll leave it there. There's a lot in this report. Apologize. We're happy to answer any questions on all the items in the report. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Mr. Bloomfield.
Yeah, a number of questions. Well, first, and also on the number of units, the 10,000 you talk about as a small percentage of the overall housing stock, but to me it's a big concern in terms of, and I think you've raised this, but it costs us about $350,000 to replace a unit of affordable housing. I mean, if we were to actually build it, most of the time we leverage it. But if you took that 10,000 number, and I know this is not a fair thing to do, but that would be $3.5 billion worth of housing stock. So when I look at the numbers, I am concerned about the numbers. I don't think it's just a small percent. I think we have to look at the replacement value and the replacement cost of some of these units. A couple of questions. How would the proposed ordinance treat accessory dwelling units, accessory living quarters? Does it expressly prohibit both? If not, why, or what's the process on that?
Sure. Matt Kolesny, Planning. The ordinance, the proposed ordinance does specifically address accessory dwelling units, which are real dwelling units. They have kitchens, and there's been some significant state law changes that makes those a lot easier to build now in the city of Los Angeles and the state of California. The ordinance does allow short-term rental activity within those units, provided you live in that unit, provided there's somebody residing in the ADU. So what is not allowed is living in a main house, building an ADU, and then just renting that out for short-term. I think the idea is we would prefer those to be for the long-term renters. However, if there is a long-term renter living in that back unit, they would be able to then share their own home. Accessory living quarters is not a full dwelling unit. They do not have kitchens. They are a subset of these kind of guest houses we have in Los Angeles that are really set up to be for guests. And so those, we think it is okay. There's no prohibition on accessory living quarters. Those would be allowed to actually, if it's not a full dwelling unit and it is a space for guests, you can live in the front and rent out an accessory living quarter because it's not a full dwelling unit.
Do apartment complex owners or any property owner or even a homeowner have the ability to prohibit a short-term rental from happening in their building or their home?
Matt Kolesny, Planning. There is a requirement for landlords, property owners, to sign off and approve any short-term rental activity in their building. So that would be part of the registration process, is to verify your property owner is okay with the activity.
But the onus is on the signer. I guess the question is, can the city track the prohibitions or allow owners to opt out by creating a registry of some sort? Property owners asked me about it, and I actually thought it was a reasonable thing to ask, which is, if you own a building or you own a home and you don't want it to be rented out, and you notify the city of your desire, then there should be a mechanism where we can prohibit that from happening.
Absolutely. That would appear to be within the bounds of the ordinance already. Again, we would proactively solicit approval, but if somebody's already given us a list and say, hey, we're not interested in our buildings and here's our addresses, I believe we would be able to build that into our registration protocols, our system, to automatically exclude those unless something had changed and the landlord had a change of heart and specifically approved it.
So then we could require that the different entities, the Airbnb, et cetera, do not list those units.
I believe we can. Yes, that's you cannot take part in this activity unless your landlord's approved. So if they've said no, that would be grounds for disapproval.
Okay, because I couldn't tell that from the way it was written, but I think that's good if that's on there, and certainly want that to be something that is on there. Now, I know Airbnb and other platforms have sued jurisdictions for creating rules related to short-term rentals. I've read that many of those efforts have ended up with the municipalities prevailing. This hopefully will help inform our debate. If we don't already have a report on the status of the outcomes of that litigation, can we get one of the different litigations that have been out there?
Sure, I'd probably defer to our Office of City Attorney. We have been keeping abreast of the various court settlements, working with the Office of City Attorney. They've been keeping tabs on many of the cases that have been happening across the country, and I'll defer here to our office.
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, if the committee would like a report back on current and cases that have already been resolved with regard to short-term rentals and home sharing, we're happy to provide that.
Great. We certainly would like to ask for that. Now, you mentioned vacation homes, corporate housing rentals. They've been caught up in the debate to some extent. And I think that there ought to be a process, and I think you alluded to that as a CUP process where someone can rent out a second home or a vacation home, but that it should be a different process than than the short-term rental process, where you have to go through a CUP process. You have to go through something that would give your neighbors a chance to weigh in, and so you understand what the impact of that is. So I guess what I'm hoping is we can instruct planning in consultation with the city attorney and CAO to report back on options for establishing a standardized platform agreement for those who provide services. Well, I guess that's including mechanisms to memorialize the agreement with the platforms, legal authority, recovery for administration, and enforcement through costs. It's slightly a different issue, but yeah. But that's a separate one. I'm reading two different things at once. But that's one I want to get. But on the vacation homes, I also want to make sure that we have a CUP process, and whether it's in this ordinance or another, that process is started so that we are figuring out how we're going to accommodate those. And it may be a similar process for short-term rentals or people who want to exceed the cap. You know, right now, whatever the cap is, we want to be very clear in how to enforce that. If someone wants to exceed that cap, they kind of then fall into, in my view, would fall into the vacation rental portion, where they have a completely different process to go through, and it's one that engages the neighbors. Now, the way it's written, if a host breaks one of the rules relating to registration or advertising, are they automatically fined, or does it start with a warning?
Matt Glesney, Planning. You know, these are the sorts of questions that are not necessarily in the ordinance. I think we have the option to do either. I think probably the best practice is to give folks a notification, give them a chance to correct. Whether it's one notification or two notifications could be determined. But I think that's what we've seen in other cities, is to give folks a little bit of a chance to come in and become legal, make it easy to become legal. And then once it's very clear that they've been notified and they still have not, that was probably the appropriate time to add in fees or fines.
Okay, and are the fines, I guess we haven't figured that out yet, but are they in line with what we're thinking of with other municipalities, or can you explain the fines that will apply to hosting platforms at this point?
Sure. Matt Glesney, Planning. There is a section of the ordinance talking about fines for platforms, and a separate section talking about fines for property owners and or hosts. For the property owner and or host, what is in there now is a minimum $500 fine or 2 times the nightly rent charged, whichever is greater, per day for advertising a listing without compliance with the ordinance. So that was increased by the City Planning Commission. When we went there, it was $250. They've increased it to $500. That is, we're seeing that it's probably on the bit of the higher end, but we're actually seeing cities that are going much higher than that with some of their fines, wanting to make it clear that there would not be an economic justification to flaunt the law. The fines increase when you exceed the 180-day cap. That would be a $2,000 day fine for exceeding that cap of 180 days currently. And then there are additional provisions for actually just violating the use agreements. On platforms, the fine on the platform side is $1,000 fine for advertising a listing that is not compliant with the ordinance. So $1,000 per day for advertising. So there is significant platform liability. We believe that they would be put on notice, as well as owners and hosts, that they're advertising something is not currently legal, and we would hope that they would work with us or else be subject to a fine.
One question might seem a little out of left field, but I haven't seen this somewhere. Right now, the cap is talked about in terms of the number of days that someone would be renting it. Has any city done, or have we ever considered, instead of the number of days, the number of unique stays, so that you could find a comparable number, but instead of limiting to a total number of days, you'd say, okay, each short-term rental host would be allowed to rent to 35 people, or whatever what the appropriate number is that's similar to the cap, but that would incentivize longer-term rentals versus the party weekend rentals to some extent. I don't know how people would feel about it. I don't know who it's good or bad for, but to some extent, it would allow some people to exceed the amount, but it would also prevent a lot of those, potentially prevent a lot of the worst of the nuisance renting. I don't know, has that ever been considered, or is that harder to implement for some reason?
Yeah, Matt Kolesny, Planning. I've seen, I think, one or two cities, and probably the dozens I've looked at that did do that. I thought it was a little odd because, I think now that you say it, I actually see there could be a benefit to avoiding the short-term stays. It would incentivize the long-term stays. On the other hand, it would therefore elongate the activity potentially throughout the year, and there would be more days, be incentive for more overall days in a calendar year.
Well, that's only it depends on what you set the number at, right? I mean, if you set the number at 22 stays, then you would get less than 180 days. I'm not saying you should do that, but I'm just saying there's a number that's roughly equivalent. It just gives some
Councilman, just
flexibility.
to jump in on that point, Ken Bernstein with City Planning. I think that is challenging in that you could have a series of stays that could be up to 29 days, for example, even if that limit were set very low, so that activity could be taking place year-round or close to year-round, and this would cease to be an accessory use to the residential use. It is something that could be, in essence, a year-round activity and increase both the displacement effects and potential nuisance effects on neighborhoods.
Right. Although the marginal difference between that and a 30-day stay, which is currently allowed without limitation, is negligible. I mean, that's where it gets tricky, I guess. I don't know. I'm just curious about that. I don't want to start a whole new line of thinking, but it did occur to me that might be another approach. But anyway, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Huizar. I've got some other questions, but I don't want to hog the mic. Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments before we go to public comment?
Yeah, just a couple. Thank you. So I have a couple of items for consideration that I'd like to come back. I know typically may have more after public comment. That's typically when these come in, but these are just coming in off reading all the reports. And then a lot of the letters that I've gotten on both sides of this argument into the office as well. So on primary residence, what I'd like to come back with, and again, I'm not asking for the committee to support or oppose this, and I'm not asking for the recommendations from the department, but I'd like these options considered to come back in the next report when we start sort of going through and dissecting all of not only what you've given us, but what this committee has suggested to you to come back with. So that's what I'd like to see. On primary residence, number one, if the activity is occurring in a primary residence, the real question to me is a cap necessary? And I'm just not there. If it's a primary residence, it means somebody's living there. And if they're renting out a room or a couple of rooms, a lot of the letters and the communication that I've gotten back from people is that this is what they're using to make their rent, to make their mortgage, to put food on their table. And if they're living there, I think it's a little different than sort of owning. I think it speaks for itself. You also may, if there are any CEQA analysis on that, feel free. And just as a side note, I didn't really buy into the argument in the planning report about the fact that if it were over so many days, then it would really be different. They'd be running it sort of as maybe a hospitality type business where there are different building and safety requirements. If you rent it for 1 day, it's the same thing as if you rented it for 395 days. I mean, it doesn't matter. If you're renting out a room, you're renting out a room. I don't know that there's, unless somebody can find something in the law, in case law, that says specifically there were a certain number of days that changes and triggers the building and safety requirements here in the city of Los Angeles, then I just wasn't there on that argument. So primary residence, I would like to come back with an option to look at no cap for primary. On the application, the self-certification, the certification process that you'd have to submit a driver's license, your voter registration card, your property taxes, your child's report cards, your utility bills, your DNA. I mean, all of that is really probably good to have for enforcement. I just know that we need it at the front end. what I'd rather see is an option to come back and have you guys look at this, is a self-certification under penalty of perjury that you are the primary resident. This is your primary residency. So if you sign under penalty of perjury, and if asked under any complaints or investigation, that you will furnish that documentation to show that it is in fact your primary, it saves us a lot of staff time, which we really don't have, and or a lot of dollars to contract with a company that doesn't know what they're doing. And I say that because every municipality that was studied in your report, these were your words, nobody's really gotten it right, and the ones that aren't working are trying to fix it. So I agree with you there. That's what I've seen as well. So maybe it's just do something different. Self-certification up front, penalty of perjury, just make it simple. And you know what? Not only is there a large fine or a fee attached, but now you've also got a fine or a fee or possible criminal action against perjury, signing a government document. So I think it just makes it easier on these folks and certainly makes it a lot easier for us. The third thing is the non-primary residents weren't really studied. In other words, the rental units. So I'd like that to come back as just for discussion where we can start looking at that. But obviously this is a big issue with a lot of people. There's no question. And so it should have parameters. So in other words, these are non-primary residential rentals. So we should limit perhaps the number at how many a person can list. So maybe somebody has just a vacation home and they only have one. And a lot of people that buy secondary homes or vacation properties do so with the idea that they know they're going to rent it out part of the year. And that's actually how they were able to financially afford that. And so maybe it's a limit on how many a person can actually list. Maybe charging a higher registration fee if it's not a primary. We can also consider it a citywide cap on ones that are non-primary. So that way we can control that as well. And if you can include any environmental analysis with that on number 3. And then the fourth thing, the last thing that I have, that I've been talking about for some time, is an actual fee study and look at the idea of $4 a day surcharge for listing on all platforms. You did mention this in your report, and you mentioned it in your opening. But what was mentioned in your report, that is, we couldn't do it under Prop 218 and 26 or 36. That's true. And so what I would suggest is we don't do it under those. We do it as a voluntary by the platforms. If we were able to give the platforms as well as the residents who are trying to make a living and also trying to keep a roof over their own head an opportunity, this is a pass-through to the people who are actually utilizing the service that are coming here to Los Angeles at $4 a day. Platforms that I'm aware of would be willing to do it. And that's what I've heard. And they also did it in Chicago, a different fee structure, but they did it there. And they did it voluntarily as well. So there are ways to do it, and we don't have to treat it as an actual tax. In other words, so it's a surcharge fee, and the platforms under all of these agreements agree to do it. And I understand that they all are. That $4, what I'd like to see is if it's $4 a day and the average day is 4 days, that could amount to, at a minimum, $10 million. What I'd like that $10 million, if we can get there, to go towards is to go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to build more affordable housing. So let's charge the people who are coming to Los Angeles that some claim are taking some of the housing stock, although I'm, again, not convinced the numbers are accurate because we had 10,000 people here in Los Angeles last year that stayed here and rented here locally because of the gas leak. But in any event, I would like to see an option and start negotiating to see if we can get there with them on that, and then use that money to lower the linkage so we can actually encourage more people to build more housing here while still keeping the linkage that the council is considering. It's a new revenue stream. This is not a new conversation. So those are my 4 things that I'd like reported back on that we can actually have discussions on. What do you need in form and fashion from us to do that, to make sure that those are included in the next report?
We will just need that in the form of a motion and a committee instruction.
So that's
to do
that's my motion. And again, it's not whether any of my colleagues are for or against it. It's just going to be discussion points. And I'm willing to
it's a
entertain
report
anything
back.
they suggest as well, yes.
It's a report back, okay.
Okay, so we're good with that from the chair?
Yes, we just want to make clear, those are report backs from staff with not a motion to take action on those. They're just
Correct.
simply report back and for further analysis.
Right, and there's no objection? Okay, there you go. Thank you very much.
Well, we could incorporate that at the main motion after this, but we also have Mr. Blumenfield's report back, so we have those two, and we'll any committee member who would like to have any report back will entertain that. So we have those two before us. Mr. Bloomfield also had a few as well, so, okay. Any questions up front now, prior to public comment by any other committee member? No? Yes, Mr. Bloomfield.
Just one other thing to add to the report back is I'd like to look at the options of, right now, all the money goes to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And since some of the impact that we're seeing on this is public safety related and police and fire, and that's where most of our general fund comes from, I'd like to look at options for having some of that money go to the general fund, see what options they come up with.
Okay. So with that, we'll begin with public comment. We do have Mr. Koretz here, not on the committee, but welcome. Any council member is always welcome to speak in the committee. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for giving me a couple minutes to testify on this issue.
Mic on? The mic's on.
I'm very concerned about a couple issues, obviously, which many of the folks that are here may be concerned about. Obviously, the draw on housing and affordable housing. The estimates have been as high as 15,000 units taken off the market. I'm not sure that we know exactly the impact, but we know it's serious, and I think we should consider that. And also the neighborhood nuisance factor, which we've seen in a very high degree in my district. We don't have the most Airbnb units, but we probably do have the most complaints. And so I think those need to be addressed. A few ways I think we can appropriately address this. One, I think we should absolutely limit ourselves to the primary residence requirement. And I think the key factor is what a primary residence is. I don't believe it's a place where you're there half the year. You're not really a resident if you're not living in your own home half a year. But if you made this 11 months and you gave the owners a month to go on vacation or something in that direction, I think it would be a lot more reasonable. If we went to either 6 months on the primary residence or if we allowed secondary homes, I think that we should limit ourselves to a 90-day cap. With the primary residence, I don't think we need a cap. But if you're having commercial second homes, multiple homes, there are corporations buying up dozens of units. And I think the place where it remains profitable for the mom and pops, but not worth giant corporate purchases, is around 90 days a year. So I hope you'll consider that if you make the mistake of going to second homes. I think we should start with primary residences. If it turns out we can't enforce it as people claim, we could take a second look at that, but I don't know that we should start out that way. I think we should continue to ban RSO units from being included for a host of obvious reasons. I also think we should have a more rigorous penalty structure with higher fines and possible misdemeanors as well for those most egregious scofflaws. I think we also need to keep pushing the platforms to fully cooperate in implementation and enforcement, and we shouldn't give away the store to get there. Also, particularly notable in my district and Councilmember Ruse and some others, we need to consider restricting home sharing in high fire danger neighborhoods. Certainly, we're trying to address party houses, but I don't think that's adequate. And having often irresponsible people smoking illegally on patios in the hills could lead to a fire with the fire danger that we're facing which we all expect to be ever increasing in this era of climate change. So I hope we'll at least consider that as well. And thank you, colleagues, for considering all of these suggestions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koretz. And we will begin public comment. Again, we will provide 1 hour of testimony. We will begin with the neighborhood councils, who we have 3, 4, 5 neighborhood council cards. When they have a CIS file, they're giving additional time. Given the 1 hour time limit, we usually provide 5 minutes. Today we will provide 3 minutes for a neighborhood council member who has a CIS on file. Everyone else will have 1 minute. We may lose quorum, so we're trying to get through this as quickly as possible. So if we'll start with Christina Spitz from the Pacific Palisades Community Council, Garrett Smith, Bob Wexler. Welcome. 3 minutes each. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Christina Spitz. I'm an attorney and chair emeritus of Pacific Palisades Community Council. First, I appreciate Councilmember Koretz's comments and, of course, all of the work of all of the council on this important matter. PPCC has submitted multiple statements on this subject to members of the committee. I want to reiterate our statement in September 2015, which is that PPCC is extremely concerned about an increasing assault on low density and in particular R1 zoning by regulation and planning measures which erode traditional protections long relied upon by homeowners. For these reasons, we urge this committee in particular to approve no greater than the 90-day annual cap, to strengthen the primary residence requirement, and to provide for a private right of action and notice to affected property owners. We are very concerned with the negative impacts that result from allowing entire homes to become, in effect, boarding houses or even hotels in R1 zones, including in our hillside and bluffs areas where we experience wildfires often caused by human activity, which Councilmember Koretz has eloquently described for you. This not only changes the character of our neighborhoods, but in many cases presents a public safety hazard. This situation has occurred in many areas of the Palisades and has literally occurred across the street from my own home, where an illegal short-term rental has been operating for over 2 years in a private residence, the entire residence, on the edge of a hillside bluff where we have already had substantial and numerous wildfires due to, again, human activity. The owners no longer live there, and the entire home is rented out in a revolving door of strangers throughout the year with little or no regard for the neighborhood's character or safety given the home's location. We urge you to ensure the continued protection of our neighborhood, of our residential neighborhoods, and we would be opposed to removing, of course, the annual cap has been suggested. I would also request that our council be permitted, and other councils be permitted, to consider these new suggestions about a CUP process for vacation homes or short-term rentals and be given the opportunity to comment at a later time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Garrett Smith.
My name is Bob Wexler. I'm in CD4, Councilman Rue's district, and I only have one point, and that you guys have already taken so much away from home sharing that there's no rationale for limiting the number of days a hosted primary residence can rent. This just doesn't make any sense, and everybody agrees that these homes are not the problem. This will only lead to non-compliance and pushing an industry underground. Santa Monica implemented a very successful ordinance. There's no limit on the number of days as long as the host is present during the guest stay. And there have been no complaints, and it's working for the city. This legitimizes sensible, legit home sharing. This is a win-win. It doesn't affect the housing market. It keeps people in their homes, and it generates more money to the city. Oh, and one more thing. And by the way, please don't confuse home sharing with party houses. It's not the same. Thank you.
Garrett Smith, Barbara Broidy.
Committee members and council members, the Neighborhood Council of Westchester Playa del Rey has some serious concerns regarding the home sharing ordinance as it's written today. Given our geographic location, we're next to LAX and Playa del Rey, we have a lot of short-term rentals working now. Some of those short-term rentals are really good ambassadors for the city. They take them on tours and what have you. It's the bad operators that we have trouble with. After many hearings with our stakeholders, we voted to oppose this motion as it's written today. In light of the ineffective city enforcement of similar housing-related ordinances, we recommend that the right of private action be included in the ordinance as an alternative means of enforcement. And we also would like to see the limitations to less than 90 days, since the magic number is 83 for break-even for to take a long-term housing unit out and break-even. I apologize. So anyways, we just want to be fair to all concerned, and I think that 60 days would be the appropriate number of days. Thank you.
Barbara Brody, Robin Greenberg.
Thank you, Chairman Huizar. My name is Barbara Brody. I'm representing the West Side Neighborhood Council. We did not have time yet to review the reports that were recently issued for this meeting. However, we had passed quite a while ago, a motion that still stands firm, and it was that we oppose the adoption of any short-term rental ordinance until which time the city negotiates an agreement with the platforms that will ensure enforcement. Enforcement is something the city does not have a stellar record with, and we believe that enforcement and evaluation are key to the success of any program related to short-term rentals. I'm not certain why our neighborhood council is listed on the agenda as yes, because we don't have a yes vote on short-term rentals at this point, because we haven't seen a plan. The reports that I've glanced through prior to today's meeting show that there are a lot of question marks. We don't know what it will cost to have an IT-based strategy. That's an unknown. We don't know if 10% of the TOT funds will be enough to have both staff online and an IT presence for enforcement. We don't have a lot of answers, and actually a lot of questions have been raised. There is no addressing of what happens when hosts do offline rentals. We know that once you've rented in a place, you like it, you have regular business in LA, you return, you come back. You don't do it on the books because you don't want to pay Airbnb and you don't want to pay a transient-oriented tax. So what happens with those? The fees that are listed in terms of keeping people law-abiding, which all of these people, by the way, are not. They are breaking the law because short-term rentals are illegal in Los Angeles right now. Escalating fines are necessary. If it's only a $2,000 fine for exceeding 180 days, what will be the profit if you rent out for 180 days at $100 a night? It's a cost of doing business, similar to our billboard fiascos. The ability of trusting platforms to provide relevant and honest information. Airbnb recently stated in a September 2017 report that approximately 84% of hosts rent out their primary residence. However, most research supports that a larger percent of overall hosting activity in terms of the overall number of nights rented comes from absentee hosts not living on site. This is damning. We trust them to do what? You have to be able to verify. Not trust, verify. So unless the city can get access to data to allow full audits that you're A, getting all the money we're owed, B, that all the platform knowledge is accurate and auditable and confirmable, there should be no deals made. And if after an agreement is forged and the platforms decide to litigate against the city, you should have some kind of poison pill that says, just like in wills and families, if you contest the will, you're out of the game. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Robin Greenberg. I'm president of the Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council, 27,000 homeowners from the 405 freeway to Laurel Canyon. We thank you for the opportunity to speak. We wish to thank our council persons that are very much in our lives, Councilperson Paul Koretz and Councilperson David Rue and their staffs who help us on a daily basis. We also want to appreciate the work of the Planning Department Through our work, we have met Tom Rothman, Kevin Keller, and Vince Bertoni, and we respect the work that they do. With respect to the matter at hand, did you know that the Bel Air fire occurred November 6, 1961? Did you know that the conditions during that fire were very similar to the conditions that we have today? It was hot, it was windy on Sunday, November 6, 1961. The notorious Santa Ana winds were blowing. Burning brush occurred in the northern end of Stone Canyon on the Sherman Oaks side of Mulholland Drive. Within a few minutes, it had moved, and it ended up destroying houses from there all the way through Bel Air, including Roscoe Road, Linda Flora, Stradella, and many, many other streets. It can happen again in a second. And it can happen mainly because there are people in our neighborhoods who are not cognizant of the rules in the fire areas. We are not allowed to smoke. We are not allowed to throw cigarette butts out. And we are not allowed to do anything that would endanger the lives of our residents and our hillsides. Today is a red flag day. Do you all know what a red flag day is? What if you were in our neighborhood as a renter, maybe coming from a different neighborhood or a different city or a different country and a different state, and you didn't know what a red flag day is? A red flag day is preventing you from parking where the fire engines may have to go to put out a fire. This is one of the reasons that we do not want short-term rentals in our neighborhood. We need the people that are in our neighborhoods to be cognizant of the rules of the neighborhood and to respect the fires that could happen. We do not want out-of-town guests without proper knowledge to come into our neighborhoods. And we do support what Councilperson Corrett stated earlier today, and we want you to know that we employ you to have everybody have proper insurance, fire insurance, insurance on the property that is being rented. Insurance should be from the owner and from the renter, because only in this manner can we protect the properties. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes the time allotted for the neighborhood councils. Now we will continue with the regular public comment period. Each speaker has 1 minute. Tony Valle, America and Penelope Lopez, Peggy Sturtevant, and Gary Payrut. We will call 5 people up at a time. Noreen McClendon. Welcome.
Thank you. Distinguished council members, all those of us today who serve as home sharing hosts are here for one reason: to preserve our freedom to continue serving as responsible hosts in our own homes on private property. This ordinance presumes to either abolish or restrain that freedom that we enjoy, not only as stakeholders in the city of Los Angeles, but as inheritors of the private property rights that are guaranteed to us by our founding fathers. John Locke stated that the end of law is not to abolish or to restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. If this ordinance would either preserve and enlarge freedom or focus on abolishing or restraining only those who abuse the privilege of home sharing, then we would all join with you in unanimous support. But this current ordinance does neither. This ordinance is flawed because it punishes the many for the sins of the few and should not be presented to the full city council for a vote. We thank you for listening to the collective wisdom of the people and urge you to oppose this ordinance. Thank you.
My parents are hardworking immigrants who came here to achieve the American dream. They worked very hard to save money for a home while we were living in the public housing projects in Boyle Heights. Unfortunately, they were taken advantage of with an ARM mortgage in exchange for an RSL duplex property during the housing bubble. We're a multi-generational household who's been using Airbnb the last 3 years. Supplemental income has allowed my sister and I to seek opportunities in tech and to give back to underserved communities and programs like Ellie's Best and Girls Who Code. It has provided my parents a peace of mind when their hours have been reduced over the years. My dad is a construction worker, and my mother is a bus driver for special ed children. Please allow home sharing and host-occupied RSO units. The report makes no mention of RSO units, but I've just heard all about a ban. We don't want a ban and a cap on the American dream that we're trying to keep. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Peggy Sturdivant. I'm a 64-year-old woman of color in South Central LA, and unfortunately, I cannot afford a home that I have been associated with for over 45 years of family property. I want to thank whoever up here was talking about the way you have looked at it. The 180 days is not promised, 10 days is not promised, 200 days would not be promised, but it's the luck of the draw, and hopefully we would be able to get enough to help us. As I said, unfortunately, I can't afford it, so I do need the assistance. I'm all for our housekeepers, our janitorial services. During the summer, I was even able to enlist their services and pay them. South Central LA does not have any hotels. We have the Mustang and the Dewdrop Inn. So we're not affecting
Snooty
any
Fox.
Snooty Fox. We're not affecting any of the hotel services there. Downtown LA is where all the money is for the palm trees on top. Can they get some days put with theirs?
I'm Gary Bayrow from West Hills, and we built a accessory dwelling unit in our backyard for my mother-in-law. My wife's mother was getting weaker and weaker, and we needed to have that for her. And we finished it, and unfortunately, by the time we finished it, she was so weak that we had to move her into hospice in our home and give her a bedroom. My son actually stayed in the room. We do not want to have long-term renters, so even though it's a studio, so it's a whole house rental on Airbnb, but it is not suitable for long-term rentals. Also, we want to use it for our family members who come from around the country, and that's very beneficial for us. A 90-day rental limitation would be a hardship to us. I'm retired. We're currently taking care of 2 grandchildren. One that actually lives with us. The other one is special needs. We help with him. He lived with us for a long time. And a 90-day limitation would be a financial hardship. And I love the Airbnb system because it allows us to see who we're renting to, and we've never had a complaint from our neighbors. I've been in the neighborhood for 25 years.
Thank you
very much.
Hi there.
What's your name?
My name is Elizabeth Etienne. I'm an RSO renter.
Did we call your card?
Well, I thought that you guys were going in order. I apologize. Did you?
No. We'll call you. We'll call you up when it's
I'm
time.
sorry, I thought
Thank you. Noreen McClendon.
Good afternoon. My name is Noreen McClendon. I'm the Executive Director of Concerned Citizens of South Central Los Angeles. Our organization's mission is to to work for social justice, economic and environmental justice in our community. Every year, millions of people come to Los Angeles, and in our neighborhood, we often are not involved in the tourism dollar. A restriction on RSO units pretty much will wipe out our community, and I think that would be unfair. Bringing travelers to the area will generate, obviously, quite a bit of tax income revenue for the city, and I think that's important. I think a CUP process for homes would create a financial hardship on property owners, even if they are just rental units, because it's going to cost money, and it also opens the door for what I hear a lot of, which is neighbors just don't want people they don't know in their neighborhood. And so it's disguised as a 50-year-old fire, party houses that had nothing to do with Airbnb and those things. So I think it's important that we recognize that they're not party houses and that our communities are not left out of the economic opportunity, which South Central Los Angeles typically is left out of those opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Mo Rama and Nancy Franco, John Choi, Elizabeth Etiennes, Leslie Hope, Somhita Mitra, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Mo Rahman. I'm the general manager of Cervicon Homes. We're an on-demand cleaning company that services Airbnb hosts. I'm here with one of my long-term employees, Nancy Franco. We're here to ask that you reconsider the proposed regulations on short-term rentals. These regulations hurt hosts and the businesses they help support, businesses like ours at Servicon. We pay our employees above the living wage, provide flexible work schedules, and offer paid sick and vacation days. Reducing the number of days hosts can rent out their homes would have a significant impact on our businesses and the men and women we employ. I'm here with Nancy Franco, who would say a few words.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Nancy Franco. First of all, thank you for your attention. My name is Nancy Franco. I work for Servicon, and I am here representing my coworkers. Servicon, it's an awesome company. I enjoy working for them. They are a great employers. I want to make sure that my coworkers and I can continue to grow together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy is one of many other employees who would be affected by the ordinance as it currently is. We ask that you reconsider the current ordinance in favor of fair rules that would allow Angelenos to continue to benefit from the city's tourism industry and businesses like ours to continue to create good jobs for good people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My name is Elizabeth Etienne, and I'm an RSO renter living in a 3-bedroom apartment. My landlord approves my short-term roommates because I'm a struggling artist with health issues, have large safety signs and fire extinguishers in every single room, and smoke detectors. I permit no stereos and have a zero tolerance for noise. I've not had a single complaint from any neighbors, and most of my neighbors don't even know that I have short-term roommates. I find that it's biased, prejudiced, and inequitable to permit only wealthy property owners to participate in the shared economy. I have shared roommates in a shared situation, and I urge you to consider RSO renters who cannot afford to own their own home. At least, at the very least, consider grandfathering certain of us into the new laws for those of us who have proven that we've kept the peace and have special needs. While I understand that RSO... Thank you.
Leslie Ho. Despite the hotel industry's mischaracterization of our community, we short-term hosts are not a significant factor in the lack of affordable housing. With approximately 1.45 million rental units in LA, with total Airbnb listings far less than 1% of that number, how significant could we be? Most of us hosts are using home sharing to meet ends meet. To protect profits, the hotel industry would like to squash us out of existence by funding so-called grassroots groups. These speakers conveniently ignore the hundreds of millions in tax subsidies the city is giving hotels that could be used to support affordable housing and city services. Instead of tearing down affordable housing to build more hotels, perhaps hotels should provide low-income housing. You've heard from the host community today. We're just trying to make ends meet. We want to be responsible neighbors and contribute to the local economy. Please pass a fair regulation that eliminates absentee owners and commercial investors and protects responsible home sharers.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Samjita Mitra, and I'm the director of the Institute for Applied Economics at the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation. Today, the LAEDC released a new report that analyzes Airbnb's impact on the LA County economy and the effect on spending, revenues, and taxes under different policy scenarios. Hospitality and tourism are important to the LA economy. As part of LA's hospitality and tourism industry, our analysis found that Airbnb plays an important role in supporting 7,440 local jobs and generating $7.1 million in local tax revenues, while also providing alternative accommodation options for the millions of tourists who visit the region. Under the current regulatory environment, Airbnb hosts and guests generate $905.5 million in economic activity annually and supports the 7,440 jobs with a total labor income of $302.1 million. We also looked at the proposed restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you. John Choi, Lou Fritz, Regina Thomas, Heather Santora, Joe Handy, and Robin Cole. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is John Choi with Airbnb. I'd like to thank city staff for their work and diligence on this issue. We want to reiterate our commitment to share data and our best ideas for a comprehensive and effective policy solution to this issue. The hundreds of hosts who you see here today are a testament to the benefits that Airbnb provides to regular Angelenos. Home sharing puts thousands of dollars in the pockets of LA residents, contributes over $1 billion to LA's economy, and to date has generated $43 million to fund critical city services. We believe the city can create a fair and reasonable short-term rental policy that protects the rights of residents to share their primary home, recognizes that dedicated rentals with reasonable restrictions must be part of an enforceable and effective policy, and ensures the protection of RSO units while granting owners and renters equal access to the benefits of home sharing. To achieve this, we have proposed to use our technology to automate registration, to share data with the city to track activity, and remove unwanted commercial activity. We look forward to our continued discussion on this important issue, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Our dedicated rental is in Eagle Rock. Our house was the house my wife grew up in. It's been in the family since 1961. When my mother-in-law passed, we renovated it and are now short-term renting it. We like the flexibility of Airbnb because we haven't decided yet if we're going to move into it. We like the ability to keep it clean, to go in and make sure it's being kept up. There aren't a lot of hotels or motels in the Eagle Rock area, and we're averaging about 21 days a month. So there's an obvious need. We rent to families, many visiting relatives in the area. We also serve a lot of parents who are visiting their kids at Occidental. We send our guests to local restaurants and pubs, highlighting the growing community of Eagle Rock. We also are very careful to make sure we're renting to families and that there are no parties. All our neighbors know that we're renting it, and if we have our phone numbers, if there's anything that happens, they call us. Thankfully, none of that has happened. We aren't getting rich. We cover the mortgage and the utilities, but that's renting about 270 nights a year. Anything less than we don't make it. The house has deep sentimental value to my wife, and for that, we'd like to keep the house. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for hearing my story. I'm a solo mom who has been sharing my home responsibly on the west side, not in a fire area, and I have resided in this home for 12 years. I started sharing my home when I became unexpectedly unemployed, and Airbnb became my chief source of revenue. I host two listings, both of which are in my home, the top floor of my home and the basement level, which is a rec room, and both have their own separate entrances. Since I'm on site, I am able to greet all my guests and monitor their activities. My neighbors are aware that I am hosting and are very supportive. They've even alerted me when I've had a guest who've lost their passport or when their car lights are on. Airbnb has been a vital source in helping me provide food for my family and keep a roof over their head, so please don't limit this vital resource.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Heather Santora. I know that LA has an affordable housing shortage. Restricting Airbnbs is not the answer. I have been renting out my back house since 2013. I would not be able to afford to stay in my home without this income. I'm a single mom that supports my family by running my Airbnb, and I also have an Airbnb cleaning company. I employ 11 other single moms, and we work with over 100 hosts here in Los Angeles. None of them are party houses. The majority of these hosts would not put their units up for an annual lease, and indeed, if I did not Airbnb my back house, I would not put it up to an annual tenant, as I share a very small lot, and I got stuck previously with a bad tenant that created an unsafe environment for my young children. I've had no such issues with my over 200, mostly international guests. The local businesses in my area love my guests and benefit from the tourism money that would never find its way into my East LA neighborhood. Please do not put a cap on my ability to home share, support my family, and bring revenue to my neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Joe Handy, born and raised in Southern California. I've owned my own home in Venice Beach since 1981 and voted in every election in the last 28 years. They say I'm a super host, and I do get stellar reviews. But as an owner who lives on an RSO property, this proposed ordinance won't let me rent the second house on our property, which we now use as a guest house. Now that we are retired, we're mostly enjoying sharing this guest house with family and friends. In between, though, we would be willing to also share it with other people, vacation renters coming to spend their money in LA. This should be a win-win situation for LA homeowners to help make ends meet and for the city. It seems to me you can do an awful lot of good with $40 million in tax revenue every year. Please let me use a secondary rental unit on our property to support us in our retirement. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin Cole, Stephanie Woods, Mark Boner, Devin Provo, Shomari Davis, Eric Erdick.
Hello, my name is Robin Cole, former NC Neighborhood Council Secretary in CD8, which I believe is the land of the free enterprise. I sweat to buy my home. I share my private entrance guest room wherein I tend to the needs of my guests, where I too live on the premises. I'm not depleting the rental market. My neighbors have no opposition to my vetted guests being in my home, as they are better behaved than some of the family members that live in my neighborhood. I can't afford to be laid off my business by special groups who seem to want to make me poor. They want my paycheck. But I beg of you to allow me to earn my living. I'm doing no harm to this community. I'm bringing enterprise to it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mark Bachner. I'm here to tell you my story as the owner of a rent-stabilized triplex in a historic neighborhood of Echo Park, where I've lived now for 15 years. I rent out 2 of my units and live in the 3rd. By offering my roommate quarters in my apartment, which is listed on the platform as an entire house, but it's just a big room with its own entrance and no kitchen. By doing that, I'm able to hold down the rents on my 2 rentals, in most years skipping the 3% allowable increase. My renters are a divorced teacher and a single artist. I understand their limitations, and I want to keep them in their homes. If home sharing is taken from me, as the current legislation plans to, I will have 2 apartments with very low rents and will be back to living on the edge, in jeopardy of losing everything myself, as I had once before after the economic collapse. And that was prior to getting involved with home sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Devin Provo, LA Business Council. I'm pleased to stand here today in support of legalization of home sharing in Los Angeles. If regulated responsibly, home sharing will generate tax revenue, spur economic development, and help Angelenos offset high housing costs. Home sharing also provides an opportunity to refuel revenue for affordable housing that was lost with the dissolution of the CRAs. We support allocating 90% of transient occupancy taxes to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. To maximize potential tax revenue, we encourage home sharing be allowed at primary residences with no annual night cap and for vacation rentals with proper restrictions. We applaud Airbnb's pass-through registration system to share data between home share platforms and the city. Data access is key to controlling illegal listings and limiting the number of rentals in operation at any given time. Every platform should be required to use this system. This ordinance is an opportunity to protect renters and create new revenue for housing. I respectfully ask that you support the home sharing ordinance with these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Woods, and I'm a 70-year-old member of my Echo Park community for the last 50 years, and I was a community activist there for almost all of those years. As a senior, I live on $750 a month from my Social Security check and the dollars that I make from Airbnb hosting since 2012. I've come today to say strongly to you all that the city must not limit the number of days that we small, responsible business people can host in our homes. Owners who occupy their properties should be able to host short-term rentals, whether as separate units or as rooms in their homes. The city should prohibit multi-unit apartment conversions to small short-term hotels. and the city should use existing bureaucracy to monitor and license short-term rentals and charge fees the same as they do to other businesses.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Erdek, and I have a duplex in North Hollywood. I bought it. It was wrecked about 15 years ago, and I fixed it up and made it available for living. I live in it. Under the ordinance you have now, I basically would not be able to rent out the building next to mine simply because there's a little space between them. You need to figure out a way to separate people who are making a business of it and buying a bunch of places from people who are actually renting from their homes. I rent about 250 days a year. International guests who are very respectful, smoke where it's allowed, don't smoke where it's not, have always been respectful of the neighbors. And having this Airbnb has allowed me to send my wife back to college. She got her master's degree. She works with at-risk youth now in the city. And I was laid off, and now I'm able to support and pay the rent with this. And if you take it away from us, it's going to heavily impact us. Also, I want to thank the council members for their amazing insight and questions. I'm very impressed with who's representing us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Shamari Davis, and I'm here on behalf of my business manager, Marvin Kropke, from IBW Local 11 Electricians Union. And IBW Local 11 and Airbnb are partnering to create the Airbnb Residential Service Directory, as my union plumber brother, Jeremy Diaz, will tell you. Today, I would like to talk about Airbnb's Living Wage Pledge campaign. Airbnb hosts are committing to paying workers who clean their homes a living wage, income necessary for basic needs for their families. Our members who passionately believe in living wage can now stay with hosts who proudly display their living wage pledge badge on their listing. We should acknowledge how rare this is in the hospitality and tourism industry. In fact, American Hotel and Lodging Association, the major funder of campaigns to oppose this short-term rental ordinances, also viciously oppose living wage and $15 minimum wage campaigns throughout the country. Please support this ordinance and crafts living wage jobs, not job losses, in home sharing economy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Debbie Pollock, Jennifer Hall, Moises Cisneros, Rob Huff, and Erlinda. Debbie Pollock. If you're up here, you could go ahead and speak if we called your name.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hall. I'm here to ask you to consider guest houses, duplexes, back houses as owner-occupied, and to not cap the days, leave it open for 360 days. I bought my house in 2007 when the prices were really high, and then in 2012, my mortgage doubled. I'm self-employed, so I couldn't afford my house anymore, so I found Airbnb. I started renting out a room in my house, but as a single girl, it was kind of odd having strangers coming in and out of my house, so I turned my home into a duplex, and it's really adorable. I love it. All my renters love it. Owning a home is very expensive in LA. Sharing your home with no caps, as a duplex, as a guest house, gives normal, hardworking people a chance to keep their homes. Without Airbnb, I absolutely would have lost my home and would have been funneled back into the rental market. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie Pollock. These are all the people in the blue shirts. Everybody that didn't have a chance to speak to you today. I'd love it if you could distribute these, please, and you can see somebody did some lovely pictures of you. Let's talk facts. Our city faces a significant deficit. Yet, fact, the hotel industry receives hundreds of millions of dollars in subsidies from the city of LA. So, fact, those subsidies could be used to spend on city services or programs for our housing crisis. Fact, home sharing put $43 million in the city treasury this year so far, and we're just getting into the holidays. Fact, the city budget needs Airbnb and other short-term rentals to have an unlimited cap on rentals.
They need to reap the greatest benefit that we can give you to benefit the city of Angels. I ask you, be the angels that your constituents need you to be. Because fact, many of us will be part of the the affordable home crisis if you don't help us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Erlinda, and I've lived in Los Angeles for 15 years and have unsuccessfully tried to rent rooms in my home in South Los Angeles for 12 of those years. I have continually been told by Angelinos that they do not want to live south of the 10 or east of Crenshaw. So therefore, I'm not interfering with the rentals in this housing market. That being said, my company reduced my salary 10% twice in the last 12 months. I was forced to use Airbnb starting in March of this past year. I've been very successful. Those people have been from around the world, many of whom had an idea of what Los Angeles was like. But many of those people have left Los Angeles, many dancing on the sidewalk saying that they can't believe this is South Los Angeles, that the people are beautiful here, and so are the homes. At this time, I would like to have a little more privacy in my home, and I'm hoping to be able to build a mother-in-law suite on my property. Please don't limit the time that we can use those spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Flanagan, Mike Kaczynski, Charuni Patibanda, Thelma Waxman, Carl Hammond.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Flanagan, and I'm an officer with the Brentwood Homeowners Association. We represent 3,200 homeowners in the 90049 district. We urgently request the limit for rentals be set at no more than 90 days, not the 180 days. A July 2016 data analysis shows that an average of only 90 days across most zip codes in LA will earn more on Airbnb than renting the same property for 1 year. This issue should not be about balancing the city budget or welcoming tourists. Rather, it is about the quality of life in our neighborhoods and the severe shortage of affordable housing. We originally supported a 60-day limit and think a 90-day compromise will allow the city time to test enforcement mechanisms that don't now exist. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Thelma Waxman, and I'm also an officer of the Brentwood Homeowners Association. 95% of our members surveyed are opposed to renting out homes without the host on premise. Here's why in their own words. And I quote, "I've lived next door to 2 Airbnb houses, people tossing out lit cigarettes on my lawn and in the neighbors' bushes, beer cans all over, and those are the rude ones. There is a surprising number of people who can't figure out how not to set off the car alarm on their rental at 3 a.m. when their flight gets in. The house next door to us became an Airbnb. It's like living next to someone who is throwing a party every single day of the week. We are nearing the end of our noise rope. An absolute nightmare. At least 2 to 3 times a week, we wake up in the middle of the night around 2:30 when they very loudly stumble in. These experiences are why BHA believes it is critical that the home sharing ordinance include a requirement that the host live on site in the residence during any rentals of the residence. This requirement will help ensure accountability of both the host and the lodger to neighbors and curtail the use of the residence for disruptive activities in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Charuni Patibanda with the California Hotel and Lodging Association. Unfortunately, the staff report left out a critical point about TOT derived from short-term rentals. Many studies have shown that conservatively, at least 50% of users of platforms like Airbnb have substituted directly away from hotels. This means once these regulations are in place, at least half of the TOT will still come through the city through our various LA hotels, and the other half can still be collected by legitimate, true home sharers that comply with all of the laws and regulations. In addition, a 90-day range cap is needed in order to properly and clearly enforce the law. This is an objective set of criteria that can be used no matter the location or the number of complaints filed against a unit. We ask that you adopt the ordinance with a lower 90-day range cap and act soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl Hammond, Susan Feller Otto, Mindy Taylor Ross, Jane Taguchi, David Chernyavsky.
Hi, my name is Carl Hammond. I'm a resident of Silver Lake. There's a simple question you have to answer. Will there be residential areas in Los Angeles, or will every area of the city become an unregulated business district? What about the rights of the residents? Like, even a 90-day cap eliminates zoned residential neighborhoods effectively. If your next door neighbor sells their home and it becomes an Airbnb, you can suddenly have a well-advertised hotel next to you for 25% of the year. That's 90 days. And imagine that happening to you. Page 2 of the STR market overview reads, units rented for more than 90 days a year as STRs are unlikely to be available as long-term rentals, and that makes sense because a 90-day cap can still have 25% of the year covered, 1 out of every 4 days in a year. But many streets just don't have 1 STR, they have 4 or 5, so do the math. 90-day cap per house 4 times. That's a neighborhood business district, not a residential district. Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Chernyavsky. I live in Hollywood, and I'm a struggling actor, and rent is my biggest expense. And as well as the points made in statistics stated previously, rental prices are being driven up, and long-term renters have been driven out as a result of unregulated short-term rental industry. The consequences of unregulated short-term rentals are not only threatening to, but have already begun deconstructing our communities. We all desire and deserve to live in safe communities with respectable neighbors in safe neighborhoods. My message is clear and echoes others present today. LA City Council needs to prioritize its residents, vote for a 60-day cap on entire home rentals, and create a healthy framework where we all can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Feller Otto. My questions to all of you are, do you live a few houses away from an active Airbnb? Do you live across the street from an active Airbnb? And do you live next door to an active Airbnb? If your answer is no to the 3 questions above, then I think it would be challenging for you to imagine the disruption, to imagine the noise, and to imagine the turmoil we've experienced since a permanent Airbnb has moved onto our street. In this particular situation, this Airbnb has 5 bedrooms, and the property was an ideal location to rent for a UCLA fraternity party. This retreat had more than 11 additional cars with drinking on the street, and I won't even go into the other things that happened on the street due to this house. This particular house has been bought with the intent of short-term rental. The owners do not live there, and they never have lived there. I have not even slept there for a single night. Okay.
Hi, I'm Mindy Taylor Ross from Venice, and my main concern with the Airbnb takeover of Venice and Los Angeles in general is that it's removing permanent rental housing from the market for people living in the community. Instead of permanent supportive housing, it's bringing transient housing into our community. At the same time, Los Angeles is experiencing its worst housing crisis in current memory. This is very disturbing, and I don't believe it's safe. You have other safer communities when you know your neighbors and you can help each other in time of need. It's an astronomical number of units that are involved throughout the city. Now, I understand all those aren't single apartments, but they are potential rentals to someone. The sheer numbers are staggering. The Airbnb crisis is also exacerbating the homeless crisis. I think they are uniquely linked. We have a terrible homeless crisis in Venice. The alley behind my home is continuously filled with homeless people, as well as Lincoln Boulevard.
Jane Taguchi, Josh Tabaglio, Emily Flaster, Michael Simkiski, Elena Pop, Fernando Gaitan.
I'm Jane Taguchi. My home is my enjoyment and sanctuary for family and friends. There should not be vacationers next door, but that is what happened to me and my neighbors for 2.5 years. An Airbnb that sleeps 12 with parties, vacationers, and parking problems. We reported it to LADBS as O'Farrell's office suggested. The Airbnb host was so mad they started a campaign against us. They threatened me at my gate, took me to civil court, sent neighbors cease and desist letters, reported a neighbor to police, reported rental violations to housing authority, all as vengeance as there were no legitimate charges. In 2015, they had a total of 4 illegal Airbnbs. I understand some want to make extra money, but commercial operators have no place in residential areas. Without enforcement, this has plagued us for years. Please limit the days per year to 60 to prevent a party every weekend. How you weigh the desires of Airbnb against the 99%ers who are neighbors like me with no financial stake in this game. Plum, I ask you to be fair.
Hi, my name is Josh Travaglio. I'm 24 years old. I live in Beverly Wood. I live with my parents. Both of my parents are 70 years old, or my mother's about to be 70 years old, and I support both of them. I pay rent, and it's basically impossible for me to move out or get anything going for myself with all of the rent prices being so high. Because of the unregulated Airbnbs, I want to be able to move out and have my parents be able to live comfortably without 100% needing my support. So that's pretty much where I'm at. We need a cap on the regulations or how many days there can be for the Airbnbs to operate. Under 180 days sounds good. But yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily Flaster, and I'm here to read a letter from my dear friend, Bishop Juan Carlos Mendez, the founder of Churches in Action, who could not be here today. Churches in Action is a conglomerate of 2,000 churches throughout greater Los Angeles and California, and his concerns are related to the thousands of community members that he feels a responsibility to support and protect and to take a stand for in the public arena when necessary. Of the thousands of people represented by Churches in Action, many are directly challenged by the lack of regulation around home sharing in LA and have been directly impacted. In LA, we currently suffer from one of the most critical housing shortages in the nation, and throughout our community, low income and the poor are being victimized by skyrocketing rents. These prices are rising even faster as landlords choose to toss out renters so that they can rent apartments using short-term rental services. Many of our community members work in the hospitality sector, and that is another cause for significant concern. How can hotels continue to advance and competitively compensate their employees when the marketplace is unfair? In reviewing the motion to allow for 180 days, my concerns have intensified.
Thank you.
I want to submit this letter.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Elena Pop, and I am the executive director of the Eviction Defense Network. We are a nonprofit organization that represents tenants in evictions. 55,000 evictions were filed last year. A good many of those were evictions that were the result of owners trying to take an entire unit off the market in order to convert it to Airbnb. We've lost over 4,000 units of rental housing to Airbnb conversions, and that must come to an end immediately. And while I appreciate the need to be thoughtful in your process, the delays and the delays and the delays are hurting renters. Minimally, you must take action immediately to stop the conversion of an entire unit from rent-controlled housing to Airbnb rental, because those are the units that are most impacted. So please take some action to protect at least rent-controlled tenants immediately while you are continuing to do your studying. Thank you.
Fernando Gaitan, Cynthia Strathman, Natty Rodriguez, Pam Pact, Johnny Ayon.
Good afternoon. I'm Fernando Gaitan. I'm with the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles.
I'm here to share just some of the observations I've seen of what my clients have encountered in this situation, the current state of affairs. LAFLA serves over 80,000 people each year. Last year alone, we served 80,000 people. Just to put it into context, to qualify for our services, a family of 4 has to earn under $2,500 a month. Just to put that into perspective, the average one-bedroom hovers around $2,100 a month. This means that our clients are desperately trying to hang on to affordable housing. One thing that I want to highlight is the importance of looking at the fair housing implications of all of this. One of our fair housing obligations is to make sure that there are opportunities, high opportunities for people of low-income households to live in, and locking out people from high opportunity areas, it creates a problem for us. Our efforts around fair housing are frustrated when large quantities of housing are taken away. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Ayon. I'm here to represent low-income tenants, housing advocates, and affordable housing developers in East Hollywood. We've had enough of going back and forth while people are losing their homes. Tenants are increasingly rent burdened and overcrowding, and homelessness is increasing throughout the city. We can't keep losing scarce affordable units to Airbnb. Short-term renters are prioritizing tourism over our own Angelinos. We need to keep a strong cap of 90 days a year and exclude RSO units. Our coalition understands that certain hosts rely on Airbnb to pay the rent. However, those same units could be leased to people already living in the streets that desperately need their shelter. Hosts need to consider your neighbor living in the streets of your community. Plum, I urge you to please pay attention to the thousands of tenants that are low income and are the working class of LA, and put you in the office. Please put an end to this and accept the ordinance and a cap of 90 days and exclude RSOs. We also look forward to most of the TOT going towards Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Strathman. I'm the Executive Director of Strategic Actions for a Just Economy. We work with low-income tenants in South Los Angeles. And every year we serve hundreds and hundreds of low-income tenants in RSO units, mostly working families. We have not found one person, not one, who is renting a room on the short-term rental market. What we have seen is families being harassed and evicted from RSO units by landlords who are anxious to replace them with better-off tenants. This is the most unaffordable, overcrowded housing in the country. Working families do not need an option to rent a spare room they don't have. What they need is protection from rapacious landlords and a system that will incentivize wealthier tenants moving in and poorer tenants being pushed out. The RSO is not intended to be a windfall for those fortunate enough to get a unit with a spare room and wealthy enough to afford one. It is intended to provide economic security for very low-income working people. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Pam Pacht. I am a renter on the west side. I want to talk to you about quality of life in our neighborhoods and also about enforcement. I do not feel safe in my apartment since an Airbnb went in downstairs. We have a very small 4-unit, lovely, older building, and now we have an Airbnb downstairs. Without getting approval, they put up walls. They now have 5 bedrooms in a unit that has 1 bathroom. Yes. And the primary renter is almost never there. So if they're smoking, if they're putting trash around, if they're doing all this stuff, there's nobody to go to. So I really don't want this ordinance to go through. But if it does, I'd like it to go through with some sort of way to quantify it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Amy Schmidt, Melissa Williams, Steve Gundel, Daisy Marco, Justin Manuel.
Good afternoon, members of the council. My name is Amy Schmidt, and I do want to make it clear that I have no issue with homeowners who are using Airbnb to supplement their income. Where I do take issue is with landlords who are using the loopholes in California Council to short the long-term housing market and to drive it up, making it impossible for young college postgrads to find affordable housing in this city where they choose to pursue their careers. I also have letters for the council from the Korean American Federation and from the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing. I'd like to present these to the court, to the clerk, and to the council for consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Williams. I'm here representing Hotel Irwin in Venice Beach. We're a small, family-owned hotel that provides 75 jobs and benefits to many of our long-term employees we value like family. As you know, there are more than 1,800 illegal short-term rental units very close to our property. That's equivalent to 15 similar-sized hotels. We know from our guest surveys, the drop in rate and reduced business, that illegal short-term rentals absolutely hurt our business and our employees. We can't compete with these illegal units and still provide safe accommodations, fair wages, health insurance, and bonuses. Although the draft ordinance does address some very important issues, such as primary residence and the prohibition on second homes, the 180-day cap is a non-starter. It's critical that we adopt a cap of at least 90 days to disincentivize the illegal commercialization of short-term rental units. Thank you.
My name is Daisy Marco, and I live in the Hollywood Hills. I used to live in a quiet residential neighborhood until I literally woke up at 2 a.m. to a dozen strangers enjoying the newly installed hot tub on the deck adjacent to my bedroom because the home next door converted into a 10-bed Airbnb. Since then, my neighbors and I have to deal with trash in our property, multiple cars on streets with already limited parking, and rowdy vacationers up all night because the quote-unquote resident doesn't really live there. We have no effective recourse because the city won't enforce existing law prohibiting short-term rentals, and police take hours to respond to nuisance calls to understandably take care of higher priorities. I urge the committee to, 1, make it mandatory for a host to be on site for every overnight stay, 2, have hosts provide multiple solid proofs of permanent residency that can't be faked, 3, limit the days to 90, and 4, provide affected residents an efficient way to shut down nuisance properties. If you don't, you may wake up one morning next to what's basically a hotel with no options to stop it.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you. My name is Steve Gendel. I'm a resident of Venice, California. Been there for 5 years. When I purchased my home, I have a 2-bedroom home. My neighbor has a 3-bedroom home, and we had long-term renters there. They were young people who worked in Venice. 2 years ago, those long-term renters were told that the home would be converted to a family residence. That did not happen. Construction started, 2 extra bedrooms were added, and we now have an 11-bed hotel next to our home. This has caused weekend after weekend of anxiety, and I would say that the unregulated Airbnb is something that you are attempting to eradicate. The people here that are responsible hosts should be allowed to commercially rent their homes, and I thank you.
Thank you. Justin Manuel, Liz Hall, Stacy Burmaster, Gloria Colazzo, Linda Lux.
Good afternoon. My name is Justin Manuel. I'm with the organization known as Trust South LA, and I am a community member in South Central. Everything I see every day is basically the same. More people are getting evicted. More people are like becoming homeless as time goes by. The population in Skid Row is getting bigger and bigger. And it all has to do with a lot of things, but also with things like Airbnb coming in and not making sure that there's like some type of housing for the people that they displace when they come and build their developments or their units there and kick out all the families that were previously living there. So the least we can ask is that 90-day cap for folks trying to rent those Airbnb units out, or folks coming with no intentions of staying for a long amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Gloria Colasso. I represent the Southern California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We are an association of business people dedicated to promoting and serving the economy and welfare of Southern California. We urge Los Angeles City leadership to take a strong stand on the ordinance and regulate on short-term rental to prevent, better, and protect our community. The hospitality industry has played an important role in our growth of our community for decades. Many of our members began their careers in the hospitality industry, and they are vendors today. But members of our community had been displaced to allow for more lucrative nightly rentals. Businesses had been hurt by transit populations that do not contribute to the local economy, and jobs had been lost due to the illegal short-term rentals. Record evictions in the city are a major contributor to the Los Angeles housing crisis. An ordinance is necessary to prevent owners from evicting residents and flipping houses for short-term rental profits. We encourage.
Thank you.
My name is Liz Hall, and I'm here on behalf of the LAX Coastal Chamber of Commerce, representing more than 500 local businesses in Westchester, Playa del Rey, Marina del Rey, and Playa Vista. The Chamber is supportive of the shared economy. However, we are very concerned that the short-term rental industry is taking a toll on our neighborhoods and our business community. Thus, we oppose allowing short-term rentals in our neighborhoods for the following reasons. Our R1 zone neighborhoods do not allow for these types of hotel uses. Short-term rentals are having a negative effect on affordable housing in the city by reducing the available rental inventory in the area, and because of the great profitability of short-term versus long-term rentals, there is enormous pressure on the remaining rental inventory. The city has no means of handling problematic renters or negligent owners, and we do not have enough police to provide our security needs when problems arise. However, we understand that the city may choose to move forward. We strongly believe that if a property is being used for home sharing and revenue generation, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Stacy Burmaster, and I've been a resident of the Valley and Councilmember Blumenfield's district for 3 years. I've heard that many people discount this problem as a West Side issue, and I'm here to say that is simply not true. I moved to Tarzana to live among neighbors, not strangers. And on my own block in Tarzana, I have experienced an increasing number of house parties and unfamiliar faces on the street. As a person who lives alone, primarily, that's very scary to see. I'm asking you to step up and adopt an ordinance that protects our valley's quality of life with a strict primary residence requirement and added protections for RSO units. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Linda Lux. I'm the former president of the Venice Neighborhood Council, and I was the president of the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners and a member for 7 years. About 5 years ago, I sold my house to what I thought was a really nice family from the Valley. I thought wrong. They turned it into a short-term rental, which is illegal. All of them are illegal in residential zones. My neighbors were appalled. I was appalled. And since then, my former neighbors report there are 6 on a very short Walk Street block in Venice with 50 homes. So 6 out of 50, and it's creeping up. It's ridiculous that you're taking so long to pass an ordinance that puts a cap on the number of days at no more than 90 max, that requires on-site people living there in their primary residence, and protects rent-stabilized units. Venice is hemorrhaging units every day. People we know every day are forced to leave. My very best friend bought a beautiful home in Venice. It was sold soon after to a short-term rental agency. She just sold and had to get out. She was living alone, was frightened, had no enforcement. No enforcement couldn't stop it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes public comment on this item. Again, we will keep the record open for the next time we hear this item. We will make every intention to hear those people who haven't spoken at today's meeting. We will also, any questions or further comments from committee members? Seeing none, so we would like to make a motion to instruct planning in consultation with the city attorney and CAO to report back on options for establishing a standardized platform agreement, those who provide the service of connecting guests with hosts. That is the mechanism to memorialize agreement with platforms, the legal authority, and the recovery for administration and enforcement costs through fees. We'd also like to instruct the planning department to report back with recommendations to create an opt-out provision for landlords to exclude their properties from participating in home sharing, something that Mr. Blumenfield requested. Mr. Blumenfield also requested various other report backs. We want to incorporate those, or unless you want to repeat them now, Mr. Blumenfield?
Sure, I'm happy to go over some of them.
Sure.
One is report back with additional options and mechanisms to allow short-term rentals in properties beyond the cap, such as a CUP, but to report on and things for vacation rentals and corporate housing. What would those options be? As well as look at the options on the cap to reflect the turning point or break-even point that we've all been talking about. What would those options be in terms of an appropriate cap number? Also, options on, splitting the revenues with the general fund, and options about and report back on the fines and the legally justified maximum of those fines. We just talked about the results of the different court cases, and I think that's it.
Okay. And we also have Mr. Englander's report backs that I think he passed out in writing. So we will give the planning department and CAO and city attorney to review those a couple of weeks or so, and then we'll be back to hear this item again in a few weeks. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, that'll be the order of this committee. Thank you very much. Next item, Mr. Mejia.
Next item, Councilman, this is a city attorney prepare ordinance as relates to the linkage fee.
Okay. So, colleagues and public, I think we have heard this, we had this item a couple of weeks ago. We are back today to talk about a report back on the nonprofits, the issues raised by Mr. Englander. We also have an ordinance with respect to a new ordinance that we will have the city attorney present the revised trust fund ordinance. So, city attorney, can you present on that item, please?
Sure. Adrian Corsani, City Attorney's Office. What's before you is a revised draft ordinance with the revisions pursuant to the committee's requests and instructions at the last meeting they considered this item. Can't hear. Is my mic on? The first set of changes were corrections and clarifications made to the ordinance that our office had previously transmitted. This included things like limiting the Slate Z exemption to 3 years, and also adjusting the TFAR exemption to only apply to the floor area that was obtained through a payment of a public benefit payment. It also, pursuant to the committee's discussion, exempts all hospitals from the linkage fee requirement, and we included a definition of hospital for purposes of this ordinance that is modeled after the definition of health facility in the state's health and safety code. The revised draft ordinance also adjusts the implementation timeline of the ordinance in accordance with the committee's request to extend that timeline to 18 months. For the first 6 months, there is no charge, and every 6 months thereafter, we increase the imposition of the fee by a third. Finally, the revised ordinance specifies that within the phase-in periods established by the regulations, the fee amount owed by a development project is based on the date a complete building permit application or a complete planning and zoning entitlement application is submitted to the city. And the Department of Building and Safety also included some technical request for technical changes and clarifications pursuant to receiving the Rule 38 letter. The draft trust fund ordinance was also modified to include the establishment of the oversight committee, and their recommendations regarding the fee in relation to market conditions may be included in HCID's annual report pursuant to that provision.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Planning Department, can you present on the report back on nonprofits, please?
Yes, thank you. Ken Bernstein with Department of City Planning once again. Department of City Planning was asked to report back on a single item, which was proposed language to include an exemption for nonprofit philanthropic institutions. Our report back, which is concise, lays out the existing definition for philanthropic institutions that's in the municipal code, and raises some policy questions indicating that that existing definition does include some older terminology, which might cause some confusion and some areas that this might not be consistent with the policy intent on this matter. So the department laid out 3 potential options for the council. First, potentially not to include the exemption for philanthropic institutions. Second, to include the exemption as it is currently written in the municipal code. Or third, to modify the language for the exemption by removing some of the exceptions which are in regards to mental health, temporary housing, or salvage organizations. So the report does lay out some potential language that would adjust those potential exceptions, and lays out as well the options for either no change or the ordinance change that could be provided based on the existing code section. And the department suggests as well, if you do include the philanthropic institution exemption, to include covenant language similar to the language that was discussed 2 weeks ago in another section of the ordinance. And happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you for providing those options. Any questions or comments from committee members before we go to public comment? Mr. Blumenfield?
Yes, so in the report you had a $1.5 million estimate for the impact. Can you tell me a little bit about how that figure was calculated?
The $1.5 million impact, I'll turn to Matt Glesney, who was involved in calculating that impact. I think, again, this is looking at past permits as best we could tell that would meet that, meet those categories.
Yeah, planning, Matt Glesney. This was a hard number to come up with. We tried our best to come up with an estimate. The data we were working with does not sort by nonprofit, philanthropic, or not. So we did just look at a sample of that, and based on our experience of how much nonprofits actually develop in the city of Los Angeles, typically they're not. So it is I think it's fair to say it's a ballpark estimate based on our best assumptions of how much actually gets built by nonprofits.
And it was using the revised definition, the more narrow definition of nonprofits, or is that not relevant?
Yeah, I think it was using the definition in the report.
Because there's 2 definitions. There's the broad one, and then you recommended removing some of the confusing stuff. Maybe, the sanitariums and other antiquated stuff.
Yeah. And Councilmember Kevin Keller, City Planning, I think as Mr. Glesney stated, the department doesn't track this type of construction per se, so we do have an estimate that may appear a little bit on the low side, but that is our estimate. I think the other thing we wanted to highlight that it does not include any potential increase in the formation of these philanthropic nonprofits, because we were clear in our report that this will be a calculation by the Building and Safety Department. It will be either exempt or non-exempt. So although the activity level is fairly low today, I just wanted to be clear that there could be an uptick in the creation of these philanthropic nonprofit activity. But based on the activity level today in the past, it's not a huge amount of activity to exempt.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to public comment. Dagan Bayless, Ernesto Medrano, Keandra Dodds, Rafi Nazarians, Laura Raymond.
Good afternoon. My name is Dagan Bayless. I work for SAGE, Strategic Actions for a Just Economy. SAGE is located in South Los Angeles. The communities that SAGE organizes are staggering under the weight of rising rents, overcrowding, displacement, and homelessness. Children cannot succeed in school, families cannot plan for the future, people are suffering from acute physical and mental health consequences from the mounting impossibility of unaffordable rents. South LA has a life expectancy that is a full 12 years lower than it is in some of the wealthier areas of our city. Truly affordable housing, we believe, is the key to beginning to undo this multi-layered project of social inequity, and the city of LA must act to ensure that developers pay their fair share. The experience of other cities across the state definitively proves that meaningful linkage fee will not halt nor significantly slow down new development, especially not now while the market is hot. It is important that the linkage fee be high enough to make a real dent in the problem, and that there be a higher fee assessed in high market areas.
Thank you. Your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Keandra Dodds, and I'm with Enterprise Community Partners and also with the Coalition for Just LA. I will be brief. We are very excited and hope that this moves forward to full council. We appreciate all of the time and the thought of all of the council members in this process, and we look forward to trying to heighten the higher fee, but also move forward to full council for full approval, and let's get this fee as soon as we can. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rafi Nazarians with AARP California. Thank you for listening to us today. The availability, affordability, sustainability, and a variety of housing options are key drivers for older adults' ability to remain independent and actively engaged in the community. AARP California has been proud to work side by side with the City of Los Angeles' policymakers on the Purposeful Aging Initiative to make Los Angeles a livable, more affordable place for people of all ages and abilities. Today we are here because AARP California is joining the diverse coalition of advocates who are supporting the establishment of the affordable housing linkage fee in Los Angeles. This is an example where Los Angeles' elected leaders are moving with the times and taking a bold step to ensure more affordable housing is created. The Affordable Housing Linkage Fee Ordinance is another meaningful step in creating communities that benefit all members of our community, including residents of all income levels and ages. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ernesto Medrano. I'm with the Los Angeles and Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council, and we're here today to support the linkage fee proposal that you're considering today. We think it's a modest, common sense policy that will mean thousands of jobs for Los Angeles tradesmen and women, but also will bring affordable homes to some of our friends and neighbors who are trying to make ends meet while during extraordinary housing costs. We encourage the committee to pass the ordinance right away and to send it to full council for considerations. Our members are eager to get to work on these important projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Raymond, Alan Greenlee, and Herman.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Laura Raymond. I coordinate ACT LA. We're a coalition of 35 nonprofit organizations working in communities across the city of LA on equitable development policy that serves communities. We oppose an exemption for nonprofits as residential and commercial development can be built and sold by nonprofits for profit. We don't want to see nonprofit status be utilized to avoid the linkage fee. This revenue is too important. We need to pass a strong linkage fee, and we need to do it urgently. The homeless count yesterday, it was reported yesterday that the latest homeless count showed a 64% increase in 18 to 24-year-olds on the streets since last year. We need to do better for our young people on the streets or those struggling to afford exorbitant rents on low incomes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Alan Greenlee. I'm the Executive Director of the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing. I'm here to encourage the passage of the linkage fee today. I think this is hour 16 of deliberation in this room with this committee. We have concerns about the nonprofit exemption. We actually think that the exemption should be connected to the building type and the building use. Seems like a more easily administrated way to go. And go Dodgers.
So we're talking about affordable housing. Assembly Bill 1618. Fuck you, Kevin De Leon, 42 U.S.C. 1983. because of the revenue impacts spoke about by the speakers on this topic, item 6. Mental health issues, the disabled, the elderly, all abused by this body called Plum. On behalf of my magistrate, Mr. Trump, fuck all housing, and I'm glad Trump is suing the fuck out of all of you white fucking niggers for making it impossible for any one of us Americans to live in a home. Live anywhere in a home called rent. So fuck you white niggers, as I mentioned, and the best note is all, fuck you Zacatecas, you 4-year-old bitch.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? No, Mr. Bloomfield?
Just one quick one. I don't know, you know, the nonprofit stuff gets kind of complicated. I wonder if down the road there's a way to have planning come to us with some sort of a waiver process, not to hold up this, but to create a process whereby nonprofits could apply for the waiver if it's appropriate, because we're worried about different scenarios where it could be abused, and I think that's legitimate, but we're also worried about the Boys and Girls Club that may be on the cusp of being able to afford to build out their facility or something to that effect. So I don't know if there is rather than having a solution to this, we could have a process solution that you guys could develop, not to hold this process up, but which you could bring back to us where it's an application for a fee waiver, if that makes sense, or I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Councilman. Is that something you might want to fold into future annual reviews, since this is going to have an annual review process, so as not to hold this up, but that's something that could be evaluated in the future?
Sure. I don't want to hold up this process, but I think there is some merit in figuring out a pathway for certain nonprofits, but a pathway that would not likely get abused. And it just occurs to me, maybe the waiver process, I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but I would put that out there as an option to think about.
Okay, thank you. We'll include that as a report back, Mr. Bloomfield. Is that appropriate? Because I agree with you. And on the one hand, if we move forward right now with an exemption for nonprofits, it's a slippery slope that I think a lot of folks would want to take advantage of. But we do want to capture those who are true nonprofits who are providing great service to the community. But it's worthwhile looking at again. But we want to keep this ordinance moving so that if we just move on the ordinance and then have that report back on a possible review and waiver at the annual report, and so we could continue to look at that and examine that to see if it's appropriate and how do we really capture those who are providing public service. So, okay, any other questions or comments? No? I have a question for the city attorney. One of the technical changes that I believe was indicated at the last hearing regarding the trust fund ordinance was the inclusion of the HCID administrative costs into the fee. Is that included here?
No, in order for the administrative costs to be captured, there is an analysis that needs to be done, so the department is currently working on it, and it can be, the trust fund ordinance can be amended quite quickly to include that once that analysis is prepared.
Okay, so, all right. So let's do this then. I'll move to approve the city attorney prepared ordinances dated October 18th, 2017, and approve the negative declaration findings and resolution. Also approve the report back as Mr. Blumenfield suggested in the annual review and a possible waiver for nonprofits. And we'd also request that HCAD provide the necessary analysis and recommendations for its administrative costs as part of its report back on the expenditure plan. Okay? Any other objections? Any other comments or any objections to that motion? Seeing none, so ordered. And congratulations to the committee. It was a lot of work on the linkage fee, but I think we put forward a successful plan to get more funding to build housing in the city of LA. Congratulations. Thank you. Next item, I believe that that's all the items on the special agenda. We started at meeting at 1:30, so that was a special agenda. Now we would go back to the regular agenda. We have item number 1, correct, Mr. Mejia?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Item 1, Councilman, this is an appeal and a draft ordinance submitted by the West LA APC as it relates to a coastal development permit. for a project in CD 11.
Okay, we're going to continue that to October 31st. So that item will be continued to October 31st. Okay, so thank you. Now we will go to general public comment. That's the last item on the agenda. Is that correct, Mr. Mejia?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so general public comment. Leah Renee Erznick? Not here. Jim Robb? Okay, you could come up and speak. You have 1 minute. Jim Robb, Tyler McAnderson, David Ewing, John Perry, Sylvia Marroquin, Lara Salagi, Herman. Those are all the speakers I have.
These were all for the special agenda. These were not for this agenda.
We're speaking on the LA Louver, which is an appeal.
And that's a second item. But,
Yeah.
But the names that you have, Laura Salagi and all these others, they're all for the special agenda, for the short-term rental ordinance.
Okay. They gave them to me for general public comment. That's why they gave them to me. I apologize. The city clerk gives me these cards for the general public comment. They didn't give them to me. It says on the top of these cards, as I'm looking to them, it says public comment, public comment, public comment. So that means that they go into the general public comment slot. Okay. Yeah, so I read the names. Anybody who wishes to speak could speak at this time. That's the way they were submitted to me. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is James Robb. I came here to speak on the LA Louver, the 45 North Venice project, which I believe you just pushed. Or am I speaking on that?
Yeah, we continued that item, sir,
Okay.
till October 31st.
Okay, well then I'll speak on the Airbnb. I live in Venice, and I would like to confirm what most of the other people in Venice said about the short-term rentals. I live next to what was once a 3-unit apartment, a 3-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 1-bedroom. The owner of the property does not live on premise. I have 20 to 30 people with suitcases that I don't know coming, partying. My wife is 8 months pregnant. They chain smoke cigarettes in the front yard, and I would be happy to see you guys stick with the 90 days on the short-term rentals.
Thank you. Tyler?
No, my name is David Ewing.
David Ewing. Okay.
I just wanted to say I don't know how this works or doesn't work, but I was to be the lead speaker for the appellant on this case that just got continued, and I'm wondering why we got no notice that this was continued, or was it just continued now? Because I've spent a good deal of time.
Yeah, let me answer you. So, items get continued for various reasons. On my notes, there was a request to have it continued. It could have been done by the local council office. It could have been done by the planning department, and those do happen at the meeting. Yeah.
Those happen at the meeting.
Yeah,
so
at the
there's
meeting
no,
they give-
no advance notice on it.
There's no legal requirement that I'm aware of to give advance warning that something will be continued. Sorry
Thank you.
about that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just to also let you know, there was a notation made on the agenda for a request to continue for this item.
Oh, so it is on the agenda that there's a request to be, okay. Welcome. What's your name? Ma'am, what's your name?
Oh, Lydia Ponce. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Lydia, I
Oh,
don't
again,
have a
huh?
card for you. Did you fill out a
I
card?
filled out a card, and it was general public comment. And
Okay, go
no
ahead.
joke.
1 minute. Go
Yeah.
ahead, 1 minute.
Thank you.
Mr. Encino, you were asked to leave this meeting. You were expelled for this meeting for obstructing the meeting. No, this meeting you're obstructing the meeting again, and you are standing around. You are expelled from this meeting. Thank you. I am sorry you have been obstructing the meeting, and you continue to do so. You do so at every committee meeting. Thank you very much. Go right ahead, ma'am.
Lydia Ponce, Venice. We're getting into such a dysfunctional family as the city of Los Angeles because we're not in agreement with the state of California or even the county with regards to protecting the affordable housing that exists. The laws are being ignored, and there's a profit that's over people, and the city continues to collect on the very backs of the people that they're displacing that may be living in their cars or homeless or unhoused that are looking for services. I, sir, was at OPCC today helping people for the Section 8 waiting list. And we know that 20,000 people selected from the 600,000 or a million people that apply is a drop in the bucket. Not even a drop in the bucket, it's a speck of dust. I'm hoping that you're listening to me, sir, because I waited a long time to speak. I really am. We need to work together to fix this. We cannot continue to erase the affordable housing in Los Angeles, every side of Los Angeles. Work with us. We're in a dual jurisdiction and we're not protected. You have to help protect us.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kendall Mayhew.
Kendall, did you fill out a card?
I did.
Okay, I don't have it here, but go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to speak about the Airbnb ordinance. I am currently fighting an eviction. I live in Silver Lake. My partner and our roommates and I are all fighting an eviction. Our landlord is trying to make our unit into an Airbnb. She already did it with the unit that's directly below us. We're lucky that we have some resources to be able to fight this, but what's going on is that so many people who have way less than I do as a 31-year-old white girl who doesn't live in poverty, those folks have been displaced already from my same neighborhood, and the impact of this is massive, and the idea that people want to protect their business over our right to live in our neighborhood. I grew up in Silver Lake, and my great-grandparents' apartment building is 1 block away from my home. I'm never going to be able to find a place there right now to rent again. I'm surrounded by lock boxes, which are indicators that there's an Airbnb there permanently.
Thank you.
This really needs to be regulated badly,
Thank
or
you
else
very
we're going to
much.
be out on the street. Thank you.
So you back there with the Eric Garcetti t-shirt, what's your name, sir? What's your name?
Jed Pauker.
Okay, did you sign up to speak? Did you sign a card?
In general comments, it may or may not have got over to you by yet.
Okay, go right ahead, sir. 1 minute. And then Herman, and then that concludes public comment.
Thank you. I came here to speak about Airbnb before taking a midnight flight to D.C. to help my sick sister, but fortunately I'll be able to postpone that flight, as it turns out. But I made the trip here because she's not dying. And it's really important that the city take into account the level of trust that we're losing in government, because we have so many years of failures to enforce. And I understand that there's a lot of legalities in making things happen, but there are some really blatant violations of law that the city can do that can protect communities, and we're just not seeing any real responsiveness. I appreciate what you're doing in terms of trying to get protections for communities and regulations going. We need to make them happen, and we need to listen to the things that we've heard today, and just do the best we can as quickly as we can, and make sure that we hold accountable those who are scofflaws all over the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Herman?
So let us thank you for all the development in which you fucked up all our lives, for people with disabilities, and more so independent living, for suing your fucking dumbasses for Plum, and issues where you built multi-units and condos and didn't have the restrictions of the 2010 standards of the ADA. And on behalf of Trump, fuck all white niggers too. And in relation to my opinion here, the Brown Act, you shouldn't be kicking people out because they're asking questions about 2 meetings that totally go chaos. Why don't you fucking have some transparency so people can be informed in their rights to speak? All these people here that are questioning about the Ralph M. Brown Act, on behalf of Sacramento and myself, Armando Herman, for the record, fuck Zacatecas and fuck the 4-year-old. Fuck you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment.
Told by the officer I could make one public
No,
comment, sir.
I'm sorry,
I've been here
ma'am.
since noon, sir.
No, I know. I called public comment, and we concluded that
I offered
after.
to put, please, 1 minute. I've been here since noon. I took off work.
Go ahead. Go right ahead.
Thank
but
you.
In the future, you need to fill out a public comment.
I appreciate that.
Ma'am,
Dear-
can I finish? In the future, you need to fill out a public comment card. get it in before the agenda item begins. Thank you. Go right
I
ahead.
appreciate it. Thank you, sirs. Dear Plum Committee, Venice is under a particular assault. We have a 3.2 square mile area. It has the highest concentration of short-term rentals, real estate prices, and the highest concentration of alcohol and beverage control licenses in the city, while long-term residents suffer under 2 gang injunctions. The city would be remiss to allow these visitor-serving concentrations in Venice if the gang injunctions were meaningful. Long-term residents of color are subject to discriminatory policing. Area crime reports on various real estate websites show a lower crime rate in Venice, including Oakwood, than neighboring Santa Monica. The short-term rental ordinance must have a stipulation that all listings must disclose if the property is in an area under an active gang injunction, or gang injunctions must be vacated by the city. The city cannot have it both ways. Secondly, according to the Office of the City Attorney, short-term rentals are currently illegal in Los Angeles, but this city council and this mayor decided to accept illegal revenue. That is called money laundering.
Thank you very much.
We need you to represent us. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment, and that concludes this meeting. Thank you very much.